Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Game Theory Podcast. This is episode 50, and we are talking about the art of war in video games.
The Art of War games.
Indeed. Yes. Yeah, first of all, sorry about the poor sound quality on my side. Just when we thought we had a stable podcast heading forward, my computer burst into flames.
It literally did.
It literally started on fire and then stayed on fire until I pulled out the plug.
It was reminiscent of Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God.
Yes. Shortly before, I typed in a blasphemous message into my computer, and it decided to burn to death.
Many a good witch.
Yeah, it literally burst into flame. I'm playing a game. I was playing Far Cry 3, the Blood Dragon. You know, like that.
There's your problem. Dragons.
Yep, there it is. Throwback. Like a cyborg super soldier that's fighting like robot ninjas and stuff. You know, typical 80s stuff.
Yeah.
I was zooming in on this character's face, and I was like, "Here goes!" And just as I pull the trigger, my computer goes, "Whoa!" And I hear the fan like just go crazy. Smoke starts shooting out the top, and flames burst out the side. And my computer's against the wall, so it was like licking the side of my wall. And I was like, "Oh my god!" And like jump up. And for some reason, like when you're in a panic, you know, you forget where everything is on the back of your computer. Like, if I just reached back there at any second, I would know exactly where the cord goes in, but I couldn't find it. I was like pulling out the mic and like keyboard, and meanwhile flames are on my wall, and I was just like, oh god, and it smelled awful, and it was like billowing black smoke, and I was like, what the f-? And I pull everything out, and then finally, you know, it stops. And then and at this point I'm like, what the heck just happened? So I pull my computer out, and I bring it to the kitchen counter, you know, and set it down. I'm looking in there trying to figure out where it went wrong, and I couldn't find it. So I was like, well, it must be in the CPU, the chip. Must be like a CPU thing, I think, you know, because it's like it's got a water cool thing, so you can't see it. So I was like, that's the only part I can't see here, and everything else seems not charred. It smells awful, but I can't find any char marks. So I was like, what the heck happened? So anyway, I call the people who made the computer for me. I bought it from iBuyPower. Had let them put everything together because I do not do water cooling, never have, and so I wanted a professional to do it. Anyway, called them up, and yeah, and I say, yeah, hey, how's it going? They're like, hey, welcome to iBuyPower. What can I do for you? And I was like, well, my computer started on fire. And she was like, really? I was like, yeah, I'm totally serious, actually. So anyway, I get a hold of the tech, and he's like, let me hear you, or like, well, what's your number or whatever? He looks me up, and then he says, oh, you've got the 9590? Yeah, that was recalled by AMD. And I was like, let me guess, it shoots flame out? He goes, yeah, that's what it does. I was like, yeah. Thanks for that. Appreciate that. Definitely happened.
Didn't get the memo on that.
Yeah, he was like, you should have a memo or an email. I was like, nope, didn't. He's like, are you sure? Check your junk mail. I was like, yeah, no, I've got Gmail. I'll just search. Yeah, it's not there. He's like, yeah, I don't know what happened. So anyway, yeah. So I sent it back. I had them do it because since it was an electrical fire, I don't know what got harmed. So there's no sense in me like they're gonna go stress test every piece, fix everything. But now I'm on my Chromebook, so.
Hence why. Yeah, that's why we don't have the sound quality we once had.
Yeah.
A long time ago.
A long time ago. At least 1 week. Anyway, yeah, so my computer died. What's been going on with you?
Well, I saw the part of my soul died. I saw the Ninja Turtles movie yesterday.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Uh-oh, not good.
Have you seen it?
No. I want to.
Okay, well.
Or wanted to, I should say.
I mean, I went in kind of expecting it to be bad because I checked Rotten Tomatoes on the way out, and it had like a 21% freshness rating, so it was super rotten. And it wasn't really fair because a week ago, before that, I was in the theater watching Guardians of the Galaxy, so the bar was already kind of raised for like, oh yeah, people can make things awesome and fun, and I can enjoy myself in a theater.
Yeah.
You know, that unusually high bar of actually enjoying being in the theater watching a movie.
worth the money, yeah.
Yeah, where I go, I don't regret spending that money on that movie. Yeah. So good news is I got a free small popcorn because their rewards card, like the customer loyalty thing. So
nice.
That was the best part of the movie.
Okay.
The rest of it was like, you know how Michael Bay has that kind of more is more philosophy?
Yes.
Well, he produced this movie, he didn't direct it, but it still had his fingerprints all over it. So there were just explosions everywhere, and Shredder was basically Megatron. He was like this big samurai robot that shoots swords out of his arms, and
oh my god,
like all the turtles were basically like almost caricatures of themselves, right? Like they're not super. I understand the source material, like they're not really deep characters to begin with,
Right.
but like Michelangelo's goofy, Donatello's a nerd, Raphael's kind of a badass, Leonardo, he's this real straight shooter.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of how their personalities. It's about the development they usually get.
Right.
So in this one, they like wrap them up in like a satire of themselves. It's like Donatello's a nerd, and also he has glasses, but they're broken glasses because he's super nerdy, and he has asthma. But he also has goggles that go over his glasses, and they can scan everything. They're like John's hand scanner in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Like, everything it looks at, it's like iris detection, complete. And you always suspend disbelief a little bit because Donatello has like way more tech than he should if he's living in a sewer. Like,
Yeah.
how much garbage does he dig through to invent that thing? But in previous Turtles things, even in the old '80s cartoon, like it looked like it was just taped together from stuff he found in the garbage.
Yeah.
Like all this, he had like hologram, like Star Wars, like communicators and stuff on this one, and like super scanners, and he was very high tech, like beyond what like most police departments use.
Wow. Yeah, and all he has available is like trash. So.
And then Michelangelo was just, goofy, and like, oh, it's funny, we'll put a fart joke in there because the kids will love that. And they did. All the kids laughed when he was like, oh, sorry, dude, it's pepperoni.
Oh my gosh.
And Raphael, they're like, oh, he's a badass. So they made him like 7 feet tall and like way beefier, like roided out than the other turtles were. And he has like a do-rag on his head because he's such a badass. And the story was kind of your normal turtle story, like, oh, Shredder is going to destroy the world, and he captured some of the turtles, and he beat up Splinter, and now Raphael's got to go save him. But, yeah, I mean, there were some throwbacks. There were a couple fun lines. Like, do you remember, were you following the development of this movie where they were originally going to make them aliens?
No, I knew I'd watch it, so I'm weird about trailers or any information, so I blacked out anything I saw.
Okay, well, they were originally planning on making them aliens.
Like turtle aliens from...
Yeah, instead mutants, they are from a different planet.
Weird.
And yeah, people got really upset about that. That did not end up becoming, they didn't end up doing that in the final cut of the movie. But they did do like a one-off line kind of making fun of that concept, so I appreciate that. And I didn't know, I never thought of this, but Will Arnett,
yeah,
he looks just like Vernon from the cartoon. You remember that Weasley guy with the pink shirt who was always scared?
Yeah.
He plays Vernon in the movie, and it actually, the personality is totally different because he's completely aggressively heterosexual in this movie.
Oh, okay.
Like he won't stop hitting on April, but other than that, like he's like, dude, I could see him as Vernon. He looks kind of Vernon-esque, which is not anything I'd want to be described as, but good on him.
Oh, that's pretty awesome. Man, that's too bad. I kind of want to see that movie. Man, what's worse is those ratings have gone down because I just looked at it today. This morning, it was 19% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's getting worse.
Yeah, and I knew I wasn't expecting a lot. The bar was really low for me. That's why I'm surprised I didn't like it. But I remember just sitting there in the movie going, like looking kind of at my watch and being like, I want to go get a sandwich. I'm hungry. And like it's. I promised my brother I'd see it because he and I were Turtles fans from the beginning. Like we just grew up turtle powering.
Yeah.
And so I told him we'd see it at the same time, then we'd call and talk about it afterwards. And he liked it more than I did, so you might enjoy it more than I did. But just from a storytelling perspective, and there were all these little things like that took me right out of it. Sometimes you can suspend disbelief on things because they're like okay, one storytelling shortcut movies always do is they'll pick up the phone and they'll never say hello. They'll just start talking.
Yeah.
Right, which never happens in real life. But you're like, that's fine. You're editing. It just makes sense.
Sure.
But this one really pushed my buttons because, like, okay, so Will Arnett, he's cooking or whatever, and then his phone rings, and he looks down, and he goes, oh, he clicks hello and goes, oh, Neil, how's it going? In his Will Arnett voice.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, okay, so he saw her come up on the caller ID. Then the camera shifts to April O'Neil. She's in the sewer on a payphone. Like does she make so many calls from that sewer phone that's how she shows up in his phone now?
Right.
It was just stuff like that where you obviously didn't I was like, did anybody ever read the script before they started filming it? Or
oh my gosh, awesome.
Like she has a cell phone. She could have called from that, and that would have made that scene make sense. But first of all, who uses payphones in 2014? And second of all, why is it showing up on his phone as April O'Neil?
I
Just
didn't
little
know.
things like that I would normally turn my brain off for. Like I didn't have the goodwill for the movie to turn my brain off, and so they just bothered me more.
Yeah, right. Oh man, oh, it's good they kept attention to the details. They're
there
very
was
detail oriented. Like,
there were a couple fun fight scenes and like a kind of a cool chase scene, but overall, meh.
why would you make them aliens anyway? Because a lot of the plot ends up revolving around mutagen.
Yeah, and they end up going back to that. And there's after you see it, I'll tell you some more little plot holes like that. Because I mean, I still end up saying it because it's a Ninja Turtles movie, and I know I'm just feeding the monster of like big budget crappy movies by giving them my money.
Right.
But you know, I had enough lingering loyalty. Like the last Turtles movie, I liked a lot, like that CG one. I know a lot of
Yeah, it
people
was
didn't
good.
like it, but I quite enjoyed it.
Yeah, I thought it was good. I liked it. I mean, the bad guy was kind of weird, but like, I
Yeah,
don't
but it's
care. It's still
Patrick
great.
Stewart, so let it go.
Yeah. And that short-lived series that looked the same was on. What was it?
Yeah, I think it's still going on Nickelodeon, like the CG one.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, it's actually winning all the awards. Like it's very highly rated.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's funny. It's interesting and I don't know, cool new twist on like the Krang type thing. But whatevs.
Oh
But,
yeah, you're talking about the cartoon. Yeah, yeah, that one too.
yeah,
There's
yeah.
a new one that's CG that's still running.
That's what I'm thinking actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, because there was a Nickelodeon cartoon that was kind of good too. It was like based more on the comics, and it had like the Ultron, like the race that Krang's from.
Huh.
But yeah, basically the point is they've done some good turtle stuff, and even going back and watching the original Ninja Turtles movies with the Jim Henson kind of puppet like guys in suits,
Right.
those guys still look better than the turtles now. Like the turtles now look really weird.
Yeah, they do. That was. Oh my god. What is wrong with this guy? How can he fuck up every franchise? And who's letting him do this?
He's like, what if we make him look like Shrek?
Yeah. What the heck? Those guys look creepy. Like. Oh well.
It feels
Whatever.
like I wanted to go in and I wanted kind of an Avengers kind of like reboot of a childhood love like franchise, but
Yeah.
instead I got like the Chipmunks movie.
Yeah. Right.
So and Megan Fox, God bless her soul, she is just not able to carry a movie. And you know how in the Transformers movie, Michael Bay's like, you know what people really came to see this movie for was Shia LaBeouf. So let's just focus on the human characters as much as possible. Keep the
Right.
robots in the background.
Yeah.
Same thing here. Like this was April's story, April and Vernon's story with like turtles popping in every so often.
Uh. Oh, that sucks.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I'm not even gonna watch that in theater. I guess I'll just wait.
Yeah,
So
sorry to ruin your plans, but you'll thank me for it. Go watch Guardians of the Galaxy a second time if you want to go to the theater.
yeah, I heard Maleficent's also really good. You guys might want to check that out.
Yeah, or I still kind of want to see that Planet of the Apes movie.
Oh yeah, hey, that's really good too. Man,
Yeah, there's
see
good
all these good.
there's good movies in theater, and I guess that was in the back of my mind as I was hating my experience.
Yeah, like I could have spent this on something else, but you got
Right.
free popcorn, so
Yeah.
equal. Anyway, well, cool. I guess that's. I don't have anything else that's really important this week. My computer died. You watched the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. Is there anything else?
Yeah, I started work again, so back on a normal schedule.
Well, you guys have been caring about freaking education. Our school doesn't start for like another 3 weeks.
Well, classes start on Wednesday, but they bring us in a few days early for training and such.
Training. Okay.
That's why I make the big bucks.
Like something totally changed over the last like 3 months. Like,
Well,
guys, listen. I know you guys left in May, but hold your horses. We're gonna be teaching from the front of the classroom. Did that change? No. Okay. Well.
well, they try and like re-emphasize things. Like right now, they want us to put more emphasis on Socratic seminars and language immersion, which I haven't been doing a lot of. So it's kind of like practicing some things like that. So basically, they observe you, and when you're a teacher, they observe you throughout the year, and they observe everybody, and then they kind of get like an idea of like where we are in pedagogy and where we can improve. And then they refocus on that for the trainings of the next year. So it's kind of like just brushing up on things that we're not doing or that we could do better.
Oh, okay. Well, that sounds helpful, actually.
Yeah, it's kind of like they give a shit about education, which is weird because they don't pay us like we do.
Yeah.
But
It's too bad, man. You come to Mississippi, we're number one in education. Well, failure, but
yeah, like if you turn the graph upside down, you guys have the highest marks.
yeah, I hate everything. Well, all right. Well, cool. Let's get into some recent news, man.
Okay.
All right, this is the recent news section. Yeah, so things that have been in the headlines. First of all, okay, so there's a game that I've been kind of keeping my eye on for a while. Okay, so zombie games in general, I'm probably gonna play it, right? Is that kind of how you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I even played some, Dead Rising games that were obviously bad, but I was like, I want to like it because it's zombies.
Yeah, right. Or like State of Decay, which the gameplay itself is not that fun. Like as far as like killing zombies, and it's
Mm.
kind of weird, a little couple of glitches, but I still played the entire thing and enjoyed it. Well, okay, so there's a new one coming out, and it's called Dying Light. Have you heard of that?
No.
Okay, so Dying Light is like a mix between like what was that early 2000 game where you run? It's like a free running game, Mirror's Edge or something. Is that Mirror's Edge?
Yeah.
Called? Okay, it's a mix between Mirror's Edge and like kind of an open world zombie game because there's zombies on the bottom. It's weird, and a mix between some other I don't know some other just regular generic zombie game, where you got to go do things, improve your position, things like that. But yeah, so it's got this free running element where you can actually even jump off zombie heads if you need to. I don't know. It seems like it could be a real hit or miss, but as they've gone through, it started to look better and better. So I don't know. Maybe it'll work out. But they just released a new review or a trailer, and this is the first one I've ever seen where they announced that they have 4-player co-op. So it's a co-op game. Probably gonna keep my eye on it. Looks pretty fun. I don't know. It looks like it could be fun.
Yeah, I mean, as long as there's jump kicking.
Yeah. Our Dead Island jump kicking. That's the worst, man. The animations were horrible. Oh well. Yeah. So there is jump kicking in this, but also like it looks pretty fun because so you're like running around. There's these zombies kind of coming at you, and you like jump and slide over the hood of a car, and then you can throw up like a little machete that has like a rope attached to it, and then you climb up that, and I don't know, it's pretty fun. There's kind of a weird thing though. Have you ever played? Did you ever play Far Cry? Far Cry? Any of the Far Cry series?
No, it did not.
Okay, yeah, that's not. I don't think it's that remarkable, but a lot of people really liked it. But it's got this first-person like parkour kind of thing, where you can like slide and you can jump up things and climb, and things like that. But the first-person view just gets after a while it just gets a little dizzying. I don't know. I don't like it. I don't like parkour first person. It's weird because you do a roll and you just like see the world go around and then you pop up and then you're constantly looking around and then you're pulling yourself up on something and the camera's moving from side to the other side as you struggle and I don't know. It's just parkour is better as a third person thing because it's cool to look at, watch someone do it.
Yeah, I don't understand the focus on first-person parkour games. Like that Mirror's Edge game could have been awesome. Like you're a kind of a smuggler runner parkour person in a kind of a dictatorship
Yeah,
dystopia. But I just couldn't get into it because, like you said, like that first-person view, it doesn't feel natural and it doesn't feel like they're trying to put you in the head of the person who's doing the running, but it's just there's some kind of disconnect between actually running around and like being in a first person game. Like maybe if it was one of those games where like we're on a treadmill, like an
yeah,
Oculus game, like that could be fun, but otherwise keep it third person, I think.
yeah. I totally agree. It's that some about that disconnects. And I don't know what it is, but I don't feel like I'm doing the moves. I just feel like okay, here goes the camera again. And it's
Yeah,
just
it's just me looking at my feet a lot.
yeah, and like the hands come up.
Yeah, that might be the disconnect. Because in real life, you have that. What's that sense where you can sense where your limbs are?
Proprioception, yeah.
Yeah, you have that, but in the game you don't. So you're always like in real life, you know where your feet are when you're running, and you can
Right.
just glance down at the ground every so often to make sure you're putting your feet where you want to. But in a game, you don't know where your feet really are, and so you're always, it's like Turok Dinosaur Hunter, how I had those platforming parts on the N64, and you're always watching your feet and like trying
Yeah.
to do things. Like you don't make first-person shooters platformers because of that, because you having to stare at your feet all the time is not fun.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you want to make easy jumps and stuff. That
Yeah.
happened a little bit in the Metroid Prime series. I don't know. Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe this Dying Light won't be amazing, but I do like the fact that like I've been kind of like, I might get it if it's on super sale, like $12 or less. But then I saw it was co-op, and I was like, okay, well, co-op zombie game. We've had fun. If it wasn't for Dead Island, I would say it's impossible to make a co-op game that isn't fun, or even like Dead Rising wasn't fun. But anyway, whatever. So yeah. I'm just gonna keep my eye on it. See what happens.
Cool. Well, I also have a little bit of news. There was remember how Amy was talking about on that show you guys did about how she wants like more exercise in her games.
Yeah.
Well, there's this new game called Crypt of the Necrodancer, And it's a
Yeah.
roguelike, but it's a rhythm roguelike that uses a Dance Dance Revolution pad, and you basically dance your way through the dungeons.
What? Really?
Yeah, it looks kind of sweet. So like, you can also control with a keyboard or a gamepad, but you can use your dance pad and get this little rhythm thing going on, and you're like dance, dance, explore. It's a weird hybrid.
Yeah, that's the weirdest mashup I've ever heard in my life. A roguelike and DDR.
Exactly. Crypt of the Necro Dancer. So if you happen to have a DDR pad, check it out. Get healthy, explore some dungeons.
Yeah, I kind of like that it's using that, but I think that's weird if it's like, is it supposed to be like rhythmic? Like you got to stay on beat or something?
Yeah, there's like I tried watching the okay, so you'll be going through it like the dungeon, and there's these like tiles that are flashing, and you want to like hop on the tiles like as they're flashing, so it's like you advance through the game at kind of a rhythm that's set by the flashing tiles.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, I haven't played it or really done too much into it. I just saw that and I was like, man, that'd be fun. A little workout, explore a dungeon,
That's cool.
fight the Necro Dancer.
I don't think I'll ever play that game. Mostly because I don't have a DDR pad, but also because I don't know why that would be fun. I mean, I've done some of those little dance things or whatever before. Like my niece got what's that called? It's like not the Michael Jackson Experience, but something like that. You dance for a thing. And I danced with her, and we had fun. You make yourself look like an idiot and have fun. I guess I would never do it like in public, but I don't really get those people. But yeah, that sounds pretty good. Well, there's kind of something funny that you know how Call of Duty. What is it known for? Like voice chat and Call of Duty. What's that experience like?
Not pleasant.
Yeah, elaborate. What do you mean?
Typically, you'll have a lot of high-pitched kids calling you adult language that they shouldn't be using if their parents were in the room.
Yeah. Okay, so that's consistent with what's going on. This one guy, he was playing Call of Duty, and he did kind of like a little intervention. So there's a funny thing I do not a funny thing. Here's a good piece of advice for conflict resolution, and it's how our brains operate. We've talked about this before, like de-escalation. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like how to completely shatter someone and restore them, be able to have a little more. Because, like I said, you get restricted blood flow and activity, obviously, in the parts of your brain that are for rational thought and empathy. Whenever you get in a fight and you get offended, right? You get butthurt about something.
Right.
And I like to use terms like that. I minimize my own anger. I say things like butthurt because, it puts it in the right light. If you say things like, when people over-exaggerate and say, like you're just the worst husband or the worst wife, or, like, if you're your friend, you're like, well, you never do anything for me. That actually escalates the situation, and it's not a true indication of how you actually feel. In the moment, of course, you do. It has to do with transfer appropriation process. Well, it doesn't matter. The point is how to get around that is you kind of do a little trick where you just compliment the other person. And you just break down. You just say like how you feel. So, like, for example, one time, if like Amy and I were kind of fighting, and I said, listen, and you just bring everything back into perspective, rather, not protective, perspective. And I say something like listen, right now we're fighting, but I think this is silly. I think you're an amazing woman, and you do things for me all the time. There's no reason why I can't do something like this. And then that completely de-escalates the situation, right? And even the funny thing is, it's actually productive for your cause because they're more likely to go, oh no, it's okay, I'll just handle it or whatever, And don't ever use it that way, but de-escalation. Okay, so somebody did this on Call of Duty, at the compliment exercise, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what they did was they said, "There's this little kid just going," and it's like British people, so it's like you fucking wanker, shut up, you're just a prick. Oh no, you're a prick, and it's like this kind of older kid and younger kid.
Adorable.
Yeah, I know, right? I've had a hard time really being offended by it, but they were saying awful things to each other. And this one guy got on and he goes, listen, I've been listening to your argument for a while now, and, I feel like he goes, I think this would just be a more fun experience for everyone if we all just were friends. And he goes, do you like playing with friends? And they're like, yeah. And then he goes, yeah, see? He goes, me too. I'm going to try something. What if, he goes, the best way to make friends is friends make you feel good. And he goes, so let's try something. It's called a compliment exercise. I would love it to have one of you guys just say something nice about the other person, just once. And the guy goes, and he goes, go ahead, just try it. Watch. Let's see what happens. And the other guy goes, okay, maybe you're not as much of a wanker as I thought you were previously, and he goes, and the kid goes, oh yeah, I mean, maybe you're not as much of a chav, which I don't know what a chav is, but whatever. and then he goes, see, oh, it's already better. And he goes, okay, one more from each of you, and we'll see how it feels. And then he goes, I'm kind of sorry I acted like such a cunt. And he goes, yeah. And the kid goes, I'm sorry I was acting cuntish too. And then the guy was like, he goes, now how do you feel? And he goes, surprisingly good. And he's like, yeah, I feel like we could be friends. And he's like, okay, let's all be friends. And then they like kept playing. It's just hilarious. How did that work in Call of Duty? Oh my god.
Maybe that should be your true calling. Like,
yeah, there you go.
Your pro bono work, you just log on Xbox Live and start mediating things.
Yeah, exactly. I can't believe those people acquiesce to that. Like I just assume most people would be like, shut up, prick, you know. But for some reason, this guy was like, oh, okay, maybe you're not as much of a cunt as I thought you were.
Big steps.
It's hilarious. And then the second one surprised me even more because he's like, yeah, maybe I should, or sorry for being such a cunt. And I was like, what? He said he was sorry. Oh my gosh. Oh well, it's funny. But it's just funny, especially to me, because I've done de-escalation things, you know, in the therapy room, and it rarely works that well, even in real life. Like if they're in a real heated argument.
Cool. Well, you're a big MMA fan, right?
Yes, I love mixed martial arts.
Oh, well, then you probably love Ronda Rousey.
Yes, the champion, the undefeated champion of the welterweight division for female bantamweight.
She's brutal. Have you seen like that fight that's so short they just turn it into a GIF where she's fighting this girl and she just flips her over her head and just starts punching her head over and over again, and then it just loops.
That just happened. That was her last fight. It was awesome. And this was against someone where they were like, "Oh man, this girl's gonna be a great fight." Like me and Amy got this fight. We got some wings, you know. We sit down with like a beer. We're like, here we go, because it's supposed to be a knockout, drag-out fight for 5 rounds.
It was so short.
Yeah. And the other girl was undefeated for the last 6 fights, and Ronda Rousey's undefeated as the champion. So I was like, this is going to be insane. It's going to be insane. We've been training specifically to beat each other. It was like 5 seconds. She just goes bam, bam, like uppercuts her, which kind of knocks her out for just a second on her feet, and then she just grabs her, throws her over, and just starts punching her face. And it was literally like 15 or 12 seconds, I think.
Yeah, like it's actually a GIF. Like that fight became a GIF.
It's that short.
It just loops. So anyway, she's a huge nerd, and she was on a like an interview, like a podcast kind of interview, and she's like super into Pokemon. Like she actually moderated a Pokemon forum back in the day. And so they're actually like trying to, you know how there's always like, wait a minute, you're not really a nerd, that kind of thing with girls.
Yeah, right.
Like the moderator, the interviewer guy is trying to like see exactly where her like Pokemon nerd level actually is. And so I asked her what her favorite Pokemon is. So what do you think she said? Like what would you say to that question?
Oh, well, you know, I would say Pikachu, right?
Right. And if you said that, that's fine. But if a girl says Pikachu, it's like, yeah, it's the only one you know. She says Mew, and then he's like, well, why Mew? And she says, because he's the originator of all other Pokemon. Like, that's some high-level nerd lore.
Oh, man. That was awesome. And it was because the interviewer, I saw that interview, too, because she was talking about, what was it? It was an interview with this guy who does these kinds of interviews, and he kind of makes a caricature who's, like, really loud and absurd. You know, he says, like, hey, so, how are you? And it's kind of like a... Yeah, it's like a caricature. Not on the level of like a Stephen Colbert, but similar, you know, where he acts like he's really into it. Anyway, he's like, so tell us something that no one else knows about you. Like that's what prompted that. He wasn't even like, you know, what's your favorite video game? And she was like, oh, well, I'm a Pokemon master. And I was watching this interview and I was like, what did she just say? Awesome.
And she also like talked about like Mortal Kombat versus Street Fighter and what she'd do if she were in the same room with a T-Rex. Like
she was like, "Wait, can it reach me in the corners?" He's like, "No." She's like, "Okay, then I sit in the corner and I punch it to death. I win." But
got little arms, can't reach her.
Yeah, it's so sad. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Ronda Rousey. She's cool. But yeah, that's fun. Good
times.
Well, did you see anything else in the news?
No, that was it for me. Just a slow news week.
Yeah, me too. Mostly because my computer fried out, so I've been doing real world things.
Oh.
I know, it's the worst. Ugh.
That's the worst.
But yeah, so I guess let's move on to gaming experiences. All right, gaming experiences. So my computer was in flames. I haven't played anything over the past couple days. But what about you? What have you been doing? You've had time off.
Yeah, well, you know, I haven't actually been gaming a lot either. I played some Hearthstone because I wanted to go through the Naxxramas heroic stuff.
Yeah.
So I finished the first wing on heroic, and that last spider boss just gave me so much grief until I just made a hunter deck specifically designed to kill spider bosses.
Yeah.
But yeah, beyond that, we played some SWTOR at the beginning of the week.
Yeah.
Brought our Sith characters out of retirement, dusted them off,
That was fun.
and played. I guess the gaming highlight was Tim GMing an Edge of the Empire game a couple nights ago.
Yeah, so that's weird on two things. Like, first of all, Tim GMing, right?
It's a rare treat. I think the last time was when we were all at Brian's Lake House several years ago, and he GM'd for like one game, the Lord of the Rings game.
Yeah, they sold that lake house. Oh, that was the you were talking about the Branson condo.
Yes.
Okay, I thought you meant, yeah, I was gonna say the lake house was sold like 10 years ago. So, but yeah, the Branson condo was sold like I think 4 years ago or something. So it's been like 5 years or something crazy like that.
Right. He doesn't GM very often.
No. But yeah, it's always fun because he's like the super preparer, you know. Like he has descriptions for every room, like lengthy, you know, interactables.
But even as prepared he was, like he showed me his notes after the session was over. It was like 5 pages of notes.
Which is a lot.
But, you know, for considering how much we played, like 6.5 hours off of 5 pages.
Well, yeah. So, yeah, he's something of a perfectionist, but it's always fun. And we had a couple people watch it too. They commented on it. They're like, "Oh, that was sweet. How do I get Tim to be my GM?"
Tim is really good too. I noticed when he was jamming at interpreting threat on the dice and like making cool story about it.
Oh yeah, that was cool.
Like he was always like coming up with cool stuff, and he was also very like yes and, you know, like I'd be like, hey, can I increase the water pressure and freeze these guys because we were like on an ice planet and they were stuck in a sprinkler.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh yeah, that's awesome. Give me a roll.
Yeah, very much into the story, which is what the point is.
Yeah, and it was fun. It was fun to actually see the game through the other lens. Like I played in your Despair Prison Breakout, and then this is my second time to play as a player character in this game. So it's always interesting to see it from that side of the equation.
Yeah, man, I had a good time. I thought it was fun. There's some intrigue, you know, there's some mystery. Then there was like a huge showdown. It was successful.
Just so many wampas.
Yeah, dude, what the heck? We opened up like this hive of wampa activity.
It was a wretched hive of wampa and villainy.
Which is pretty funny because we were just complaining about the fact that our characters are starting to get a little too strong. We got our butts handed to us there.
Yeah, well, we got pretty, and then everybody was like NC-17 was like fighting off 2 wampas, and then there was like one eating my leg, and everyone's like, "Go help NC-17!"
Yeah.
It's like he has a soak of 10. They're not hurting him.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that was pretty awesome. Yeah, we were like driving out this little pitchfork thing, you know, with what were we bringing? Not the hyper.
The Cortosis.
The Cortosis, that's right. The Cortosis. Yeah, we're bringing out the Cortosis, and it's all slow. It's like me, and we're like, come on! We're like blasting wampas off, and they're like leaping onto our little yeah, and then we're like, get out! So we're like point blank blasting them in the face, throwing thermonuclear detonators almost. Like we were just going nuts. Oh, Blaine, just in time. Blaine, which is one of our listeners, he got to play with us, and or he got to, like, that's some big reward. He was able to play with us. I mean, in the sense of like his schedule and everything worked out, and he just got a flamethrower attachment, so he was just cooking everything.
Oh, the smell of roasted wampa was pungent that night.
It was. We couldn't get out of our clothing.
So yeah, it was a fun climax, and like the obligatory like race down the collapsing mountain in front of an avalanche scene at the end. And, yeah, really good sense of pacing. Like I thought it was really well done, and felt like we were really into it. I felt like John was like settling more into like maybe because there were no social like weird things happening, but it felt like he was settling more into Valentin a bit better.
Yeah.
Like he got owned hard. He got shot so bad.
Like 3 times. He went like unconscious or whatever, or to the 0 point like 3 times. Man, but he kept it going. He's a hero.
So looking forward to the part 2, like the conclusion of that. We've got the what we came for, and we just have to deliver it to Mandalore. So hopefully you guys get to hear that when.
That'll go fine, I'm sure. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's fine.
Go to Mandalore, hand off some Cortosis weave, which is like the equivalent of like mithril, you know.
Yeah, we give him some mithril.
It'll be fine.
Yeah, well, plus we're supplying it to the rebellion, for the local rebel forces, and huge Imperial presence on Mandalore, so it should go well.
Also, we've all got huge bounties, so that's a thing.
Yeah, I foresee joy and pleasure on
I don't
the.
even know why we did another campaign. We should have just said, okay, so I sell it.
I sell it. Everyone gets a billion credits.
It'd be fine. Yeah, so that was really fun, guys, and hopefully we'll get that out. That's really David's pet project. There, he edits them and takes out just hours of worthless conversation. The best stuff.
If you want to see the raw, it's already up on our YouTube channel, just like unedited. But if you
Horrible.
want to wait for something that's actually listenable, it'll show up on the podcast eventually.
Yeah, as like one of those bonus episodes. What else? Oh yeah, Wolf Among Us. We both beat that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you didn't seem like that impressed with the ending.
No, I didn't. I mean, I thought it was cool. It all culminated. The story.
Yeah, I guess we won't go into the spoilers, but I guess like that little like last ending twist was like made me a little bit more excited than you.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think because I was trying to figure out if it was a huge plot twist or if it was just like this minor thing, like, oh, okay, I see, blank blank, and I started like putting in my head of like how it could be a huge twist. I was like, oh, so maybe, oh, and then maybe this and what, and then when I called you and I was like, what did you take away from that? And we basically came to the conclusion that it's not a big twist. And then I was like, oh, okay, meh. Okay, but yeah, really fun series, man. And man, I remember you mentioned that you want to go read the comic books after this. I do too.
Yeah, it turns out Bigby is like kind of got a lot of cool stuff in his background, and like the reason everyone's like scared of him is because they'd be crazy not to be, because he's just like this elemental force almost. Like,
Oh, yeah.
like he's basically like if a tornado like put on a business suit and like went to interview for a job, like, and he's like, no, I'm fine. Like, well, your tornado's like, yeah, I'm keeping that under control though. And it's like just this little tornado sitting there. You're like, I don't know, man. Seems like you're pretty dangerous still.
It's like, no, that's good.
That's how people should treat Bigby, which is actually pretty accurate because his father is the North Wind, so he's
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
he's a demigod.
And his mother was like a massive like direwolf.
Yeah. So
So
winter is coming.
it's coming, my friends. Yeah, I really enjoy that series, man. I really do, and I think I'm gonna try to push for the comics, seeing if I can get like maybe they're somewhere for cheap or something. Because
Yeah, get one of those collected like hardbacks.
that'd be rad. Speaking of that, Did you ever read Invincible?
I did. Yeah.
Okay,
You,
cool.
you loaned me your copies, and I read them all.
Oh, good. Yeah, okay. Just making sure that you got through it. Man, love that series. Yeah, but other than that and Far Cry 3, Blood Dragon, like I said, which fried my computer, which is just like it's like a stupid little fun game. It's not like anything you should take seriously, but if you get it for like a couple bucks and play through, if you were ever alive
Yeah,
and thought 80s action movies, even like RoboCop will count. It's still like, oh god, yeah, I remember this.
No, I read your Steam review. Stupid fun 80s action game. My computer got caught on fire. Would play again. 9 out of 10.
Yeah, I was hoping that would inspire some, some interest in the game, but.
Set my computer on fire. Would play again. 9 out of 10.
Would play again. Yeah. Oh, speaking of which, I had to ship that back, and it costed so much money. So much money. But anyway, whatever. They're gonna fix it. Other than that, yeah, browser games is it's on the menu because I got like this old Chromebook, and Chromebooks are like they're like $150 or $200. They're like nothing, and they're just like internet devices, So it's got a hard drive. Like it's like 200 gigs, but I never use it because I use Google Drive, which comes with it, like 100 gigs. So yeah, so browser games. If anyone knows any good browser games, throw them up on the Facebook page. Let me know. That's my order. That's what I'm doing over the next 2 to 3 weeks. So
you should get into play-by-post. Do some online D&D.
Oh, yeah. That sounds good. I've been trying to get into those. I guess I'll just see what I can do.
I find it gives me like a reason to do a little bit of like creative writing every day. So like helps you stay good at writing.
Stay good.
Stay good.
Stay good at writing.
Helps you write good.
Okay, yeah, all right. Cool. Yeah, I'll do that. I'll look into that. But other than that, no other gaming experiences. So I guess we can move on to the big topic of the show, the in-depth analysis. All right, this is the in-depth analysis for anyone just joining us. Actually, no, I might make this a one series one because right now we just cranked out like a bonus episode and then a two-part series, so a lot of people are like kind of probably backlogged. So I might make this a one.
Yeah.
Probably will.
For
Probably no.
anyone that, for anyone that forgot since the last few minutes.
Yeah, this is about the art of war. The art of war in video games. So, art of war. I think this is an interesting one. Why did this stand out to us? I remember we talked about this for a while.
Yeah, this is to me one of the most overrated books in the history of books. Like there's like Art of War, Machiavelli's The Prince. So there's like a few books people always turn to as like these fonts of like infinite wisdom that is mostly just like common sense or wrong information.
Have you had the experience too that like people like name drop these books?
Oh yeah, these are the books that you buy, like you buy for your freshman like philosophy 101 or history of Western literature class, and then you don't sell the book back at the end, and you just keep it
Yeah.
on your bookshelf forever. So when people come to visit, they're like, "Oh, I see you have the Art of War on your coffee table.
You're like, yes,
Intellectual."
I'm very smart and things.
Yeah, it's this whole like, and it seems a lot, especially in the business world, like a lot of people fetishize like they'll have like their Stephen Covey and then Sun Tzu next to it, and like people really are like, "Oh man, that ancient." It's that fallacy of like, I don't know what the formal name of this, but or if it even has a formal name, but the fallacy of it's ancient and from the Far East, therefore it's wise.
Right, right.
It's kind of like pseudo racism, where you're like, oh, most honorable Sun Tzu, he is very wise. Like, is that because he's wise or because he's Chinese?
Yeah, what are you saying here? Yeah, man, that's my. Of course, yeah, I did the same thing. I've got Art of War right now on my bookshelf. I'm a big bibliophile, though. Like so, I like to collect
You
books.
have sex with books? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, bibliophilia.
Yeah.
Yeah, the love of books. And so I like to put. I mean, like I even spent money getting copies I already had, but in nice like hard like leather, cases.
Mhm.
That hard leather case, am I right? But yeah, because like I love to. The thing is like when you read a lot, and I used to, and not so much anymore. Now I'm all reading just psychology, but when you read a lot, you kind of like don't have anything to show for it except for like pretentious parties.
Yeah, I think a bookshelf is kind of like the achievements board on an Xbox Live account.
Yeah.
Like people can come over and be like, ah, you read the Odyssey, achievement unlocked. You've read War and Peace, achievement unlocked.
Yeah. Plus, you get an idea of like I walked into my clinical director's office, and he's first of all he's got the sweetest office. Everything's like rich mahogany, but he's also got like a bunch of masks from different parts of the world on the wall, and then he's got like a couple other like kind of cool things. He's got a chessboard.
Don't
And,
even
like,
say rich mahogany. That's redundant. Just say mahogany, man.
yeah, done. But he's also got like, cello and like his office is just rad. But all those things kind of give you a picture of like his adventures. But then to get a picture of his thoughts, I look on his shelf. I do that with any office I walk in. I look at all the books because it gives you an idea of like what they prioritize. It's not just what they've read. Sometimes they haven't read everything on the bookshelf. Sometimes they have. It's just what they brought. So I just think it's interesting because like if you especially psychologists, if you walk into a psychologist's office and it says anything about Carl Jung or dream theory, or anything like
Just stand up and walk away.
yeah, just go away because no respectable psychologist would have that stuff on his bookshelf right now at all.
I can't wait to get someone to see my office bookshelf because, on the top it's got like all my literature stuff, and then
Yeah.
the bottom is like all my political theory because a big part of my I didn't sell books back either for the same reason. I was like, well, I paid for these. I can sell them back and get $2 on for every 20 I spent, or I can keep them and look smart. So it's got those. But then the bottom shelf is all like Marvel comic books.
Yeah.
And that's clearly like the more prominently accessed shelf. Like there's comics taken out and they're like in out of
Yeah.
order. Like obviously reading those more than anything else on the shelf.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, soon Fable will be up there too, but maybe.
Yeah.
That's definitely one I'd like to get into.
But Sun
Okay.
Tzu, a little background on him. Like he's one of those people who's kind of like let's go with Homer, where we have things attributed to him, but we're not really sure if he even existed.
Really?
Yeah, doing a little research into Sun Tzu because again, he's kind of a big deal in China, and some people they're not even sure if he was real or if he wrote what we said he wrote or if it was from someone else. But there was a story from one of his like ancient biographies, and talks about kind of how he was, right? And I feel like this kind of reflects a lot on the kind of person who would write The Art of War.
Hmm.
Okay, so the King of Wu, the kingdom that Sun Tzu was in, he was like a tactician there, and the King of Wu wanted to test his abilities at commanding, so he gives him his harem of 180 concubines and says, "Turn them into soldiers." And
Hmm.
this is like misogynistic, like 500-ish BC China.
Right.
So so he's like he basically saying take the worst possible. Like now, if I was like, "Hey Jeremiah, here's some women, turn them into soldiers," you'd be like, "Yeah, okay, I can do that." But this is like a huge deal because these were concubines. Like their whole job was just like look sexy for the king and have sexy times.
Right.
So Sun Tzu takes the king's two favorite concubines and makes them company commanders, right? Because harems will kind of get their own little hierarchy, and like the king's favorites tend to have more power. So he's like, "All right, I'll work with that. You guys are the commanders." So he gives them a command, and he orders them to all the concubines to face right, and they just giggle because they're concubines. That's what they do.
Right.
And so he reiterates the command, saying that the general is responsible for ensuring that the soldiers understand commands given to them. So at first he blames himself. He's like, "I'm the general. They probably just understand my commands." So he does it again, and again the concubines giggle. So what does he do next? He orders the execution of the two favored concubines, like the sub commanders.
Wow.
It's in front of the king, like it's during the demonstration. And the king's like, "Oh, wait, no, I like those ones." And Sun Tzu's like, "No, it's cool, man. Listen, if the general soldiers understand their commands but do not obey, then it's the fault of the officers."
Huh.
So he said once the general was appointed, it's his duty to carry out his mission, even if the king protested. So both concubines are killed, new officers chosen to replace them. Afterwards, both companies, now well aware of the cost of further frivolity, perform their maneuvers flawlessly. So it's kind of whether or not that story is true, it kind of like reflects a lot in how he saw like warfare.
Hmm.
Very kind of like it's all needs to go together like a well-oiled machine, and you do whatever it takes to make that happen.
Right. Yeah.
And he was also very influenced by like Taoism in his references, right? It's like he talk about like the five paths and the six ways, and like the using nature as a way of bending it to your own advantage. Like he does very like if you read the whole book, it's very like low on force. Like the American military is huge in the art of war, right?
Mhm.
But I don't feel like they have that same approach to it. It's more of an Eastern mindset. Like American military is like, well, I guess we can send more drones and bomb some more. Or like Sun Tzu is more about like if you're using force, that's the last result. Like let's try and use this. Let's use this. Let's use like the water. Let's use the wind. Let's use like the mountains. Let's use the terrain. Like he's very big into like letting the battle kind of fight itself, almost like a kung fu style,
Right. Right.
like
Be like Wata.
redirecting force to the enemy.
Hmm.
So those are kind of two kind of background things going into the art of war to keep in mind. It's like Taoism, and then he's kind of a sicko who murders horse.
Sun Tzu. Huh. Okay. Well, my history with Art of War was, yeah, I used to be into marketing. So like marketing. I remember there's a book called Art of War and Marketing, or Marketing and the Art of War, or something like that. The
Mm.
title was pretty generic, and it was one of our textbooks, like an optional textbook, but it was a textbook for goods and consumers. So anyway, yeah, they do like so a lot of people put a lot of love into this, but I read the whole thing in college around that time.
Mm.
Have you read the whole thing?
Yeah, junior high, one of our friends, Jimmy, was really into this book, and so I read it like I guess in eighth grade, and
Hmm.
yeah, meh.
Yeah, like that's what I did. In college, I dedicated some real time to this. I was like laying on my bunk reading it, and I was like, "Wait a minute, this isn't that smart." And like, I got to the end, I was like, "Well, there was a few good pieces there. There was a few pieces that were like, well, no shit." And then there were some obviously wrong pieces. Did you get that sense?
Yeah, I felt exactly the same way. So I think for our discussion tonight, what we could do is just kind of divide up our favorite pieces of no shit advice, obviously wrong advice, and then
Right.
useful advice, and then like how it applies to different games we played and various other things in life.
Yeah, I think that'd be a sweet thought. And I had another thought too. I'm gonna tack on at the end and see what you think about it. But so some then okay. So first of all, we introduced this as kind of saying it was kind of lackluster,
Mhm.
like well, no kidding, kind of rolling our eyes. So what are some examples of that? Do you have one you could think of? Right
Yeah,
away?
I've got one. I've got one right here. It's near the very beginning when he's kind of like laying out his whole thesis on how warfare should be conducted. He says, "All warfare is based on deception," and this is what everybody quotes from Sun Tzu. Like you always see that, like the top, like the beginning of movies, they'll be like, "All warfare is based on deception." Sun Tzu, The Art of War.
Right.
But then he elaborates. Hence, when able to attack, we must seem unable. When using our forces, we must seem inactive. When we are near, we must make the enemy believe we are very far away. And when far away, we must make them believe we are very near. Hold out baits to entice the enemy, feign disorder, and crush him. If he is secure at all points, be prepared for him. If he is in superior strength, evade him. If your opponent is of a choleric temper, seek to irritate him, pretend to be weak, that he may grow arrogant. If he is taking his ease, give him no rest. If his forces are united, separate them. Attack him when he is unprepared. Appear where you are not expected. These military devices leading to victory must not be divulged beforehand.
So don't tell him beforehand.
Yeah, don't tell him your plans beforehand.
Uh,
Yeah, so like breaking it down to real advice, he says like act weak when you're strong and act strong when you're weak. And if he's not ready for an attack, make sure to attack him. If he is ready to attack and if he's stronger than you, get away from him. Don't let
yeah.
him attack you.
Retreat. Yeah, that's pretty hilarious. And obviously no shit. It's like
It's one of those things where you read this and go like, what was war like before Sun Tzu? Like where people are like, oh, he seems ready. We should attack him even more now.
exactly.
Oh,
Well,
he's retreating. Leave him alone. He needs to regain his strength.
well, yeah, right. Or what about anyone can figure this out literally? Okay, so you walk into a game, and like for example, me and Amy played PvP a lot, in a lot of games. But let's take World of Warcraft for example, right? That's really the first one she got started on. And she was relatively new to competitive gaming. She played cards and things like that, but in video games. And she figured out real quick there's this hunter who started owning everything, right? Very, very powerful, and we got the fuck away from that very powerful thing. And what we would do is we'd engage other people who were not as powerful, who would most likely win against.
Ah, I see you are students of the art of war.
Yes, the art of war, indeed. Also, no, she figured out like literally first match ever played ever within the first like I don't know 3 kills. She was like, "Yeah, I'm just not gonna fight that girl anymore." I was like, "That's a good idea. Let's go fight some other people who are weak." Like like the classes. There's kind of a rotating balance. It's like mages are good against warriors. Warriors are good against priests, things like that. So like you fight for your balance, obviously.
Right, and like if he is taking his ease, give him no rest. Yeah, it's called harass. It's pretty much the first thing you learn how to do in StarCraft.
Yeah, yeah. Or like, what happens if like you're fighting and the person starts drinking a potion or they start bandaging?
Yeah, you probably
just
attack
go,
them at that point.
yeah, you're not gonna go. I better wait for a second. That was a really close fight, and I'd hate for him to lose on the grounds that he was bandaging. So
Yeah, or when going back to World of Warcraft, like you were saying, like you know how they'd clump up in a group and they'd come in and attack the flag room.
yeah,
And what would we do? Would we stop and like the three of us attack that group, or would we go and attack their flag room and force them to break apart and divide?
right.
Oh man, Sun Tzu,
Sun Tzu.
brilliant.
Exactly, and like everybody got this. It was like people in the chat would be like, "Stop attacking them, they're zerging," which means everyone's going together, and you're like, yeah, that's pretty freaking obvious, and we're like, "Yeah, we know, dude. There's no one that's actually attacking them. Look, they're hunting people down that are trying to run away because it's such a natural instinct to get the fuck away from something powerful that's gonna kill you."
Yeah, that's. Actually had a hard time with this episode because we wanted to divide it between like no shit and good advice.
Hmm.
Like, the obvious advice versus the good advice, and I was like, this is good, this is obvious, this is obvious, this is obvious, but people always make the mistake, so maybe it's not obvious. Maybe this is actually good advice, and people should read this book.
Huh? Yeah, maybe. Maybe it's our like experience with like. I mean, we played a lot of like strategy games growing up, RPGs and stuff. Makes you
Yeah.
kind of think ahead. Maybe that's part of it.
Because you're right, a lot of people would do the exact wrong thing in those situations online.
Okay. All right. So maybe that's kind of like one of those questionable ones. But how about this one? The proper season to attack by fire is windy and dry days. He goes into more than that. He talks about like the astrology stuff. About how windy times are during this time period.
And like nighttime, the wind doesn't last as long as daytime. But basically, yeah, windy and dry days are the proper times to attack for fire. I saw that one too. It's beautiful.
And that is not. I don't know anyone who would ever not know that. Like
Like, okay, let's go back to pre-Art of War. General, yes, our fire bombs are not working. Perhaps we should wait for the monsoon season to end. No, we have to use them now.
attack while they're still strong. And then Yeah, that's weird. But he does talk about like some cool things with fire actually that I thought was kind of cool though. He does talk about like how you can use it as a driving force, to like manipulate the battlefield. Um,
Yeah, we had David Serlin like kind of has a whole section on his Playing to Win blog about like attacking with fire, where he talks about like using it as like a way to like almost like a sheepdog would send a herd in one direction.
yeah. Yeah. I hate to like really shit on this attack or the Art of War because David Sterling, he's a really smart guy. Obviously, we had him on, and he kind of uses this as a structure to talk about competitive gaming, and he kind of talks good about it. So take that in temperance. If you want to hear the other side of the debate, go probably read his blog on this. But as for me, I don't know. We'll talk about a couple good points. But another funny one was he has this whole section, right? I think it's section 9, and it's about like or no, section 3. There's 3 sections of the book. The first one's like talking about what was it? Like attacking or something. I don't remember, but it's like the kind of immediately obvious stuff. And the third section drew my eye when I was reviewing this because it was talking about situations, like how to adapt. Because the first two were just like general principles, like and those were just absurd. It was things like if your enemy is at the top of a mountain, do not run up the mountain, for your troops will be tired. Like, well, yeah. And like other things like that, like it's like if your people are retreating into a canyon, be careful, for there might be an attack. And I'm like, well, yeah, that might happen, but also it might not. And also,
troops are tired. Perhaps you should let them rest to regain their strength. It's like stuff that you would see on a tutorial of like a Total War game.
Yeah.
Be like, warning, your troops are getting tired. Perhaps pull them back and let them regain their health. You're like, thank you, tutorial.
Yeah, which you probably would have done anyway. But yeah, I don't know. But there's one. Okay, so he talks about a few different situations, which I thought this was pretty cool because I was like, oh, this will give me a look into his eye. Because when we do intelligence testing, one of the things we do is fluid reasoning, and fluid reasoning is the greatest indicator for actual intelligence, right? It's this idea of like being able to think of novel situations. So one of the ways we do this is like Raven matrices or like pattern recognition. So it'll be like, oh, look, a star, a ball, a star, and then what do you think's gonna happen? And it's a ball. Anyway, so it's like a pattern and then making an assumption of the next one, and then it gets more and more complex over time, and that's a really good indicator of true intelligence. And so this fluid reasoning. So I thought, oh, this would be great. This is him having his reason. He's kind of like adapting it, right? Because anyone can make general principles about things like the 10 Commandments, but that's not really impressive. That's a mark of a simple thought. But like a more complex one is like, okay, here are the contingencies in which this is a good idea to do, and here are the contingencies in which it is not a good idea to do. Because then you've fully thought your idea through, both the good and the advantages and the disadvantages of the thought, and then you temper your advice accordingly. So on this one, I was like, man, I don't even remember reading that section because this was years ago. So I went back and like skimmed back through it, and there's this whole idea or this whole part where he talks about like the different grounds. And I kind of remember him talking about for example, like hostile ground. So that's like, oh, if you're in your enemy's territory, there's things you need to do, and it's kind of like if you're in the enemy base in Team Fortress 2. Like you got to be careful because that's where they spawn, right? And the way he talks about it is like, oh, well, they have the home court advantage because anyone could be your enemy, that kind of thing, right? But there's this one ground that he calls desperate ground. Tell me if this is not the most obvious thing you've ever heard in your life. So desperate ground, what does that mean, son? What's that mean, Esu? He says, well, that's ground on which we can only be saved from destruction by fighting without delay. That's desperate ground. What do you think? In such a situation, you must fight.
Okay.
Yeah, so wait.
I'm with you so far. So you define the terms as a place where you can only fight, and then you give the advice as you should fight.
Yeah, exactly. and the funny thing is he prefaces this whole thing with, he goes, here's some advice I'm going to give you about situational advice, right? And then he says, but the unique part about this section is that there is one and only one way to act in these situations. And that's already a mark of a simple mind. You're like, oh, don't ever...
Yeah. Only a Sith deals in absolute.
Exactly. Like, okay, wait a minute, that's not recognizing exceptions, and that shows that you're not very bright. Like, because, they say, like, it's like when you work with people with, like, intellectual disabilities, for example, they say things like it's real simple in life, just do good by people. And I'm like, that's not going to do it. Like, that's not very good advice. I mean, yes, obviously, try to, but you should also have ideas of contingencies, like, unless the person is clearly manipulating you or clearly using you for your money or whatever, So have some contingencies. But in this one he doesn't. Oh my gosh. So this desperate ground is one of them. He also says, well, this isn't actually. there's a lot in here that are just wrong. Like one is
Before we go on to just wrong advice, I've got one more bit of obvious.
oh yeah.
Um, this is he has like a little 8 sentence thing where each one I'm just like, yeah, obviously, yeah, obviously. Like in your head, after I read a sentence, you're gonna say, of course, of course, of course. So starting off, Sun Tzu said, "Whoever is first in the field and awaits the coming of the enemy will be fresh for the fight. Whoever is second in the field and has to hasten the battle will arrive exhausted." 2. Therefore, the clever combatant imposes his will on the enemy, but does not allow the enemy's will to be imposed on him. By holding out advantages to him, he can cause the enemy to approach of his own accord, or by inflicting damage, he can make it impossible for the enemy to draw near. Okay.
Yeah.
If the enemy is taking his ease, he can harass him. If well supplied with food, he can, what do you think?
Starve out the other guy?
Yes, starve him out. If quietly encamped, he can force him to move. Appear at points which the enemy must hasten to defend, then march swiftly to places where you are not expected.
Oh my god.
An army may march great distances without distress if it marches through country where the enemy is not. I swear to God, he just said you can march at ease if there's no bad guys around.
Yeah.
Okay, couple more. You can be sure of succeeding in your attacks if you only attack places with. Okay, I can't even say this out loud. Let me try it again. You can be sure of succeeding in your attacks if you only attack places which are undefended.
That's not even defined as an attack then. It's just sort of walking in.
You can ensure the conversely, because we like to have this like AB then BA format when we're doing Chinese like fortune cookie wisdom.
Yeah.
So conversely, you can ensure the safety of your defense if you only hold positions that cannot be attacked.
Well.
And then the last one, hence, and this is like his like. Because these 7 sentences are right in a row, right? This is where he's just dropping wisdom bombs left and right.
Right.
And he says, hence, that general is skillful in attack whose opponent does not know what to defend, and he is skillful in defense whose opponent does not know what to attack.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, he uses that skillful and the what was it? He uses 2 terms. I think I made a note of it even. His I forgot. I remember skillful general, and then he also says what was it? I don't remember. Oh, the wise leader. The skillful leader, the wise general, or skillful and wise leader in general are the 2 terms. And it's always that, like, oh, the good man does this, the bad man does this. And I'm like, oh, those always like reek. I just hate them.
It's very much like if you guys have seen Mystery Men, it's like the Sphinx, where he has all these wise sayings. He's terribly mysterious, but when you break them down, they don't mean anything. Like there's that perfect scene where they're doing their training montage, and Ben Stiller's character he's balancing a tack hammer on his head. He's like, tell me again why I'm balancing a tack hammer on my head. And the Sphinx is like, he who learns to balance a tack hammer on his head heads off with a balanced attack.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it doesn't actually make sense, but it sounds really wise.
Right. Yeah, that's this crap. It completely plays psychologically on our confirmation bias, because when you're told something, the way that you work is you do a little fact check, right? So like if somebody says, when you unload the dishes, it's best to do them by cutlery first. What you'll do is you'll think in your head why that's true. That's our automatic fact check, and it's a strong cognitive bias that we've shown plenty of time in research. It's called confirmation bias. You can go look up plenty of studies. There's thousands of different modalities we've tested this with, but typically that's what we do. We do a fact check. We go, is that true? Huh? And then and inversely, if you feel poorly about the subject, like if you're in a fight, and like somebody says, oh, you always do this or whatever, then you think, well, here's the time I didn't, and you point that out. But so that's the one exception. But in general, we have this confirmation bias if you're not like in threat mode, and so this operates on that. Like all these like stupid little sentences of like, here, do this, and you're like, let me think of an example where that works. Okay, yep, you're right, and they call it good, good in all situations because they thought of 1 or 2 where it worked.
Right, or they'll just say things like that are completely obvious but not helpful, like, if you only hold positions that cannot be attacked, you'll have great defense. It's like, yeah, but how many of those places exist in real life that are useful as as a fortification? Like,
yeah.
How many floating bubbles with force fields around them existed in ancient China?
Pretty sure 0.
Probably 0, but good advice.
I'm not a historian though, so I don't know. But
or only attack places which are undefended. It's like, yeah, ideally that'd be great, but how practical is this advice if it's like, I don't know. It's like saying like you'll always do well with women if they find you attractive.
Right. Yeah. And that idea of but yeah, see, and okay, a lot of this. Okay, so we'll talk about I guess the obviously wrong ones, but I think even the idea of like dividing and conquering, that's kind of a substrate of all these thoughts of like, attack when their enemy is
weakest.
Yeah, when they're weak, or when you have greater numbers because you have a better chance of winning.
Yeah, he gives like a formula, right? Like he says, like if you're 10 times as many, then you can attack and surround them. If you're 5 times, meet them head on. Like he has like different breakdowns for like what you should do depending on your number advantage.
Yeah, which is another silly like absolute, because then you're like, oh no, that's not really true. People like the Spartans, for example, are going to be greater warriors than like the Athenians, for example. That's just because they're better trained soldiers. So then
the Athenians are better mathletes.
Mathletes. Super helpful. Those guys are always in the back. Remember the calculator from Final Fantasy Tactics?
Yeah. They make great calculators.
There you go. Or like if I don't know, yeah, if you have the superior positioning, then if you have a greater number of archers, to shoot down on them if they're in a canyon or something, you're more likely to win. But whatever, that's more confirmation bias. You're like, yeah, of course that's the case. But divide and conquer is another kind of obvious one, not in the sense of like how geniusly like people like Napoleon or something did it, but more in the sense of like if you have 2 encampments of people, attack them each one at a time rather than splitting your force.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that seem kind of obvious. Like it's all like kind of knee-jerk reactions to stuff you would have that you would have done anyway. Like, yeah, I'm thinking of like StarCraft, for example. If they're like if he's setting up on 2 bases, I'm gonna take each one out individually. I'm not gonna split my forces and go to each base. Why would I do that? That's stupid.
Right, or in a co-op game of StarCraft, you never like, hey, let's attack 2 different bases at the same time. Like you always take both armies and attack one base, forcing the other guy to bring, like eventually they'll combine their armies too, but you'll have some advantage at the beginning when they're divided.
Right, exactly. A lot of this it seems so obvious, but the funny thing is, even the obvious stuff, he didn't even really get all this right, because there was something he did that were just obviously just ridiculously wrong.
Let's move into bad advice.
The bad advice, yeah. This is the ridiculous stuff that like do not do this, and I'll point out a couple examples on mine at least of like video games where you'll be able to obviously see. If you can't see right away, I'll point it out through by way of example. But one is another one of these like ground kind of situational ones. This is a flash into the mind of Sun Tzu, where he's tempering his old advice and saying, no, actually in these situations do exactly this one and only thing. You can only do this one thing, and this is the only way to win. Otherwise, you will be defeated. And he has this one called, he's laying out these different kinds of ground. So like when you're at war, you have different kinds of grounds. You got home ground advantage, where like the Belgians, for example, crushed the Germans pretty well because they were able to fire out their windows and like break their own bridges, and like it's home court advantage versus like hostile territory. But then he also lays out a lot of different kinds. Like one he calls difficult ground, and so mountain forests, rugged steeps, marshes, fens, things like that. That's all country that's hard to traverse. He calls this difficult ground. In difficult ground, keep steadily on the march. That's his advice.
So when it's difficult ground, you should just power through it?
March steadily through it. Yeah, that's the answer. Pretty sure that's just obviously wrong. I started with this one because there are certain situations where you could think, maybe so. Maybe I can see some reason in that. But overall, if you're going up a mountain that has a forest on it, you want to steadily stay on the march? I don't think that's true, because I run, for example, and whenever I take a hill, I slow down a little. If I try to steadily like march through the whole thing, I mean that's I don't know, it's absurd. Typically, there's like certain things you need to take into consideration when you're during troop movement, and like a lot of them are just don't go through the mountain forest. I thought that's what he was going to say. Difficult ground, avoid it. I mean, that's a bad idea.
Or use it to your advantage, like make that like a natural defense, like a barrier against attack, and camp with that at your back or something.
Yeah, but
that way, if you get attacked, then the troops are tired who just went through the marsh or whatever.
Yeah, sure. There's that. There's also like, let's say you have to traverse that. Well, what I would do, and I have some in my background in the military or whatever, we had to do some troop command, and like what I would typically do is say take this about half speed. Like instead of the typical kind of airborne shuffle ruck march we do, where it's kind of like a very fast walk to almost like a short run. You do this like half movement thing where basically you're just kind of real leisurely walking, because you got to worry about foot placement, because you could have people break their ankles and stuff because they're not looking down at where they're going. So we typically spread out a little bit more, and then we have you gingerly, make sure you know where you're going, be wise when you're footing, things like that. But we move at half speed. I thought that was what he was going to say. Avoid it or move at half speed. No, steadily march on through. Just steadily. That's literally the grunt answer. That's literally the worst answer. I can't think of a worse answer than this, unless he said go double time, like run. You know, then I'd be like, okay, that's really dumb. But
I found this one that says all armies prefer high ground to low and sunny places to dark.
what are you supposed to do with that?
I don't know, like, does guerrilla warfare not exist in ancient China? Like, when you have, let's say your army is not a large army and you're facing off against a larger army, do you, as a smaller force, do you prefer sunny places to dark? Or high ground to low?
I always prefer high ground to low, yeah.
And always prefer sunny to dark. Like, I don't know, man. We do some pretty great things with hit and run night attacks these days.
Oh, yeah.
That's like before infrared was invented, and so.
Yeah. Nowadays, obviously, like, yeah, most of our ops are at night. In Iraq, at least, that was my experience for our entire brigade. We in fact, there was actually a whole company that was like the Nighthawks or something. They had most of the Apaches in it. And they were called, like, because we own the night. Superior technology allows us to do anything we want at night that we could have done in the day, whereas they don't have that same advantage. So
yeah, you're usually vampires.
Yeah, exactly. We do most of our ops at night because when an attack helicopter goes, has no lights on, which is almost all the time. I've actually never seen an attack helicopter in the States, but all the time in country you always have all your lights off. You can't, like, you hear this vague like chopping sound, but you can't identify anywhere where it is, not even the general direction, and then it just starts laying hate down. But yeah, we own the night. I don't know, but that's with today's technology. But keep that in mind that this is required reading in the War College.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, it might have been a good advice 2,000 years ago, but yeah, we're not. I don't know why this is still considered as anything but like a interesting development in the history of war. Like, if you're taking a history of war class, this should be required reading.
Yeah, it's like maybe some movement, but this would be like reading like the French General Lafayette's ideas of war. Like the wheel command and the drill and ceremony that he taught us. That's interesting for the time because it helped them move large columns of people, but we don't do that anymore. So that would be a really dumb thing to study.
Right. It'd be like if you were going to be a biologist and they made you spend the first made you take a whole class on Lamarckian evolutionary theory, or even on like abiogenesis or creation science, like to get a PhD in biology. Like, well, okay, so at one point we thought that a magic man created all the animals. So let's study that for a semester, and then we're going to study, like all these other like outdated biological.
Yeah, you mean with no reference to the fact that have different thoughts now and that do that anymore?
They have like a history class, like actually being like, well, we're going to teach you this. Like, that's the first thing. This is the basis of what your education is going to be. Right.
Yeah. Here's one that I can't think of how this would ever be a good idea. Not even in context. And he calls this thing, and StarCraft, or okay, in fighting in general, like, I'm a martial artist, have been for a long time, mixed martial artist as well. There's this, in Smash Brothers, same thing. Like, whenever we are going to face off, that there's like a distance. In martial arts, we call it the striking zone, right? Mm-hmm. So close enough to hit you, and you're close enough to hit me. Right. That's like the sweet spot. That's where like everything happens, right? Mm-hmm. It's about positioning, it's subtlety. So in Smash Brothers, it's like this distance where like I can hit you with a smash move and you can hit me with one. It's usually a little further than that in Smash Brothers because you can actually dash in, but like you kind of dance around that area and then you try to do these little attacks, right?
Right.
It's like that sweet spot, and that happens in martial arts as well. Like for me, I've got longer limbs, so I typically try to get them outside of their strike zone and they're within mine, and then I operate there as best possible. And this transfers over to like something like StarCraft, for example, or like Natural Selection 2 is another example. I can think of any game. There's this sweet spot that you can attack from, and you've got this great advantage if you can attack them and they can't attack you. So like a martial arts, I've got longer limbs, I have been trained on how to kick, so I can keep them at a kicking distance, and which is nowhere near their punching distance, and I'm going to wreck them for a while until they get frustrated and move in. So
right. Or if you're Marines and there's Banelings coming at you, you can do that kind of like stutter step where you're just staying outside of their range and shooting them.
Yeah, or like siege tanks in that game. Tanks in general, like in Dawn of War. I won't get into all the examples, but the Tau had this like kind of siege ability where they had super long range, and you sit out there and you just harass the enemy, and you pick as many of them off as you can as they come in. There's that was what this guy would define as facile ground, which is French easy ground, right? Mm. Is that an English word too, facile?
Yeah, it's facilitate. It's where we get the word facilities.
Oh, okay. Well, There you
Asking if it's an English word is like, well, kind of like the Normans conquered England. They gave us all their words. Now we have them in English.
go. Okay. I guess this isn't the vernacular, but I guess maybe not. But so he says, okay, so when he has penetrated, this is the quote, when he has penetrated into hostile territory, but to no great distance, it is facile ground, or facile ground? I don't know how they say this in
Yeah, I'm not
English.
sure how the English pronunciation would be.
Okay,
Facile.
I guess I sound like a pretentious douche for a while as I say it in French, but I don't know how to say it otherwise. But on facile ground, halt not. In other words, don't stop. So whenever you get to the striking distance, that's inside of hostile territory, but at no great distance, don't stop. Which I think is the dumbest advice ever. That's my favorite thing to do is siege out an enemy. You know, like move into the point where I can hit them, they can't hit me, and then I have all my reserve army right there waiting for them. So they get picked off as they enter my strike zone, and then when they get to me, they're at smaller strength, right? So like siege tanks in StarCraft, or like in remember in StarCraft Brood War back in the day, we had those the flying guardians. They got this little like kind of poisonous spore out that hit them from a distance, and then the enemy's like, oh crap, they're here, and they have to run through that to get to you, which is awesome. So I think this is not only just obviously wrong, it's super obviously wrong, and I can't think of any context in which this would be a good idea if you have any sort of ranged weaponry. Like,
yeah, I'm trying to think of I was like, they had the longbow back then. Or they had not the longbow, but they had bow and arrows. They had ranged weapons. I was trying to think of like what situation where this would have been good advice in the context of when he wrote it. But either way, it's not good advice now.
No, and even if it's not, I mean, like back in like the biblical days, they had these, those little peltist guys kind of who like ran around with like, sling and stone, like David and Goliath, he threw a stone at them. They use those slings all the time. They hunt
David's.
Yeah, super Davids. But like even then, like
+5 versus giants, really good to have.
+5, those stones, it's so bad, man. But actually, those things, have you ever used one of those old school slings like that?
No.
Oh, my stepdad built one for me. It's just like strip of leather, and then like a patch in the middle, and you put it in there, and you just swing it around your head, and you let go with it's attached onto one finger with like a loop, and the other one you're holding, and so you let go, and it pops it out, and you can get some distance and accuracy with those things.
Oh yeah, and even before that, they had those spear thrower things where you'd like put the spear inside of a thing that you hold, and you like I forget the name, it's like an atlatl or something.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so you've always got this superior range where that's where you want to be. That's your sweet spot. Like if you're strategist. So I don't know what he's talking about. I can't imagine this is ever a good idea. The Romans did it with their histati or whatever, or histati, where they had two throwing weapons, the pylons, and they'd throw those, and then they would, as the person got closer, and they stab anyone who got to them.
Yep.
So,
basic.
I don't understand how this could ever be good advice. So anyway, that was just one that I saw that I thought wasn't useful.
Any other just wrong advice that you came across?
Well, there's kind of a funny one. He talks about that strong versus weak, like you talked about earlier, and it made me think about he says that like present yourself as strong when you're weak, and when you're weak, present yourself as and when you're strong, present yourself as weak. So you kind of bait attack, which sounds like a smart idea. It's like, oh yeah, if you're weak, you don't want to be attacked. So you want to appear like you're super strong. But also, and when you're strong, you want to bait them into attacks. You act like you're weak. Oh, okay, I get it. And then he reverses it and says the same thing with the enemy. If they appear strong, then attack them. But if they appear weak, then don't. And I was like, what? Wait, what? And that's the part.
Yeah, that's me. Like, wait, so you're assuming he's always going to be trying to trick you the way you're trying to trick him?
Yeah, that was the first part of it. I was like, I guess I can see that. I don't think that that's true, because whenever I'm weak, I don't mind if I show weakness, but then I get scrappy. So like, let's say like in like fighting, for example, in martial arts, if I get hit and I get hit a couple times, I get rocked, kind of like get fuzzy headed, and you're like, oh man, you're about to pass out. You get some spots in front of your eyes. Well, then I'm gonna take the guy to the ground, right? Or like that's a bad example because that's kind of unique to fighting, but you're going to try to do things like in StarCraft. If they start moving out with this massive army coming towards my base, and I'm Zerg, I know I can't take it. Then I go and attack his expansion and his main base with a bunch of little Zerglings, right? Try to bring him back to his base, right? You get scrappy. In other words, like it's not about. I don't know. I don't think that I need to appear strong. I don't know. I guess that's just in general. If you appear strong, then I don't know. What was it? First of all, don't ever attack an enemy that appears strong. Why would you ever assume that that's false information?
Yeah.
Second of all, if they're not weak, why not attack? Because it said, oh, they're baiting you for an attack, and I was like, no, that is just wrong. If they appear weak, attack. I mean, and then have a contingency plan.
Attack cautiously, have a way out if it's a trap, but don't just always assume. It's like, man, the only possible way they could be weak is if it's a trap. That's the only thing.
Right. Yeah. And then it'd be like, well, then you mean that your advice in vice versa is common knowledge then?
That's been what John was reading. Remember when you guys found Linnea the first time in that game we were playing, that Star Wars game?
Yeah.
She was blind and frozen in carbonite, and he's like, "Oh, that's definitely a trap. Like she appears weak, so she must be strong. Probably a Sith. I'm anticipating Force lightning."
Get ready, guys. He starts cranking up his anti.
No, it turns out 9 times out of 10, if you appear weak, it's because you're weak, and if you appear strong, it's because you're strong. So occasionally there will be cases where that's not the case, but I don't think that should be your default.
Oh yeah, and he said the funny thing is he said if the enemy, this is how he kind of clarified it. He said, the strong versus weak thing. He goes, if the enemy is charging at you and they look like they will make every point to make an attack, then that's how you know they're weak and you need to strike them. And then, but if they're fleeing, then that's a trap. If they appear weak and that they're disorganized and that they're not ready for an attack, well then that's when you need to not strike, because that's a trap. And I was like, wait a minute, you said earlier in your book that when they're weak, attack them where they're weak. How am I going to know if it's real or not real at that point? Like, if all information is telling me they're weak, am I to assume that they're actually strong and they're baiting me? Or, wait, what?
Right, he talks about the use of spies, but then he's also like, but you can't trust your spies sometimes because their spies might be feeding them false information. So it's just kind of self-negating advice a lot.
Yeah, it's my problem with Proverbs, right? Like as in the Bible, not to get too religious, but that it really bugs me that there's a proverb for every situation, even self-conflicting. Like there's literally one back to back that says, "Trust not a fool, lest you be foolish yourself." I think I should have looked it up. And then the very next sentence says, "Trust a fool for his folly, so that you can give him wisdom," or something like that. That's the idea of it.
And even not just biblical, but just Proverbs in general. Like there's a saying for everything, right? Like absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Yeah, and out of sight, out of mind. Like they're conflicting, and you just all you do is you ad hoc after you have some experience. You think, oh, what's that book that's super wise? The Bible or whatever you're reading, astrology or whatever, and you say, oh yeah, I remember in the astrology section it did say I was gonna have a bad day. But if you didn't, anyway, you get evidence per your experience just by nature because of our confirmation bias. So that's why I don't like this book, because it gives a lot of principles, and then I'm like, well, which one are you gonna draw from here? It's absurd. It's absurd. Well, but I don't know. So we just shit on that book for a long time, right?
Yeah, let's go into what it got right, because I found some things that were maybe kind of obvious, but like I said, a lot of people don't do it, so maybe it's not as obvious as I think it is.
Oh, okay, yeah. Let's hear some of that.
So one thing he says, there's 3 ways in which a ruler can bring misfortune upon his army. 1, by commanding the army to advance or to retreat, being ignorant of the fact that it cannot obey. This is called hobbling the army. And so I don't know if I feel like this is kind of a common mistake commanders will make, is like they'll give their troops orders that they can't carry out.
Yeah.
And then the second one is by attempting to govern an army in the same way as he administers a kingdom, being ignorant of the conditions which obtain in an army. This causes restlessness in the soldiers' minds. So we see this a lot in role-playing games we play, where we try and kind of democratize like our strike forces. Like, oh, Rafe, you're the commander. What should we do? I don't know. What does everyone else want to do? And we all kind of have debate it and have a vote, and the High Council comes and vetoes it. Like this huge process where we just need to take action.
Yeah.
And then the third thing he says that could bring misfortune on an army is by employing the officers of his army without discrimination through ignorance of the military principles of adaptation to circumstances. This shakes the confidence of the soldiers. So in other words, and we see this a lot in the real army, is just like almost random promotions that don't make a lot of sense, like promoting people who are friends or who like look good on paper but they're not really good, or like you're trying to fill a quota of some kind, and then it shakes the confidence of all the men underneath them, because like, why is this person the commander?
Yes, yeah, like the driving force in the military is time and service. Mm-hmm. So like if you've been in for a while, you almost always get promoted up to a point, and up to an E5, and then past that you kind of have to have some stuff on paper. But even then, it's time and service. Like you have to meet that criteria before you can get promoted. Like,
right.
I shot up the ranks pretty quick, but then I got stymied by that because it's like, oh yeah, you actually have to have this much time and service to become an E6. Sorry, and I was like,
weird, because everybody has read The Art of War in the American military, but they must have skipped the "do not employ officers without discrimination."
Yeah. Yeah, and there are a lot of shitbag NCOs like that. That's like the enlisted level officers, non-commissioned officers is what they're called. So like they're kind of like they're the sergeants. All the sergeants are NCOs. So they're the people who are in charge, but they're just there because they've been there for a while, and they didn't screw up so bad that they got kind of red flag where they couldn't be promoted. So like, oh my god, they're usually just worthless. And then you've got these, sometimes you've got these lower privates who are much better soldiers and better put together, and they should be leading, but then they're not. And it's really upsetting.
No, it causes restlessness in the soldiers' minds and shakes the confidence of the soldiers.
It does. And it's super important, like when you give an order to know what your battle strength is. Like we learned that in ROTC program when I was going, or I thought I was going to be doing that. And in college, not the high school one, but yeah, they would teach these. They do a lot of this crap in that ROTC. I quit the program because I was like, you guys are not training officers. You guys are training losers. This is ridiculous. You can't do this stuff in real Army. And that was a lot of times they would forget to do that, like assess their battle strength before they moved out. They'd be like, okay, so we're moving out at 0800, and you're like, whoa, dude, we got to break camp. And then at that point, we got to pack our rucks. And then at that point, we've got to put on our weapons, or put on all of our gear, get ready to go, and we have to somehow eat food. And like, yeah, 30 minutes. And you're like, yeah, that's not going to happen.
This is called hobbling the Army.
Yeah, and then you get in trouble for it, right? Which causes us restlessness. We're like, because we said 0800, you're not here. Oh, now you're going to get smoked. And then you go on and it's just, yeah. In other words, just being a bad commander, I think. Yeah, but I found a piece that was actually really good, too. And it was realize that the victorious strategist is he who only seeks battle after the victory has been won. And what he means is choose your battles, right?
Yeah.
So like don't ever take a fight that doesn't look like you're gonna have victory, because he makes that distinction between that where like a guaranteed victory versus like where you enter battle and then you look for victory.
Yeah, I had that written down too. The good fighters of old first put themselves beyond the possibility of defeat, then waited for an opportunity of defeating the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
To secure ourselves against defeat lies in our own hands, but the opportunity to defeat the enemy is provided by the enemy himself. Therefore, the skillful fighter puts himself in a position which makes defeat impossible and does not miss the moment of defeating the enemy. Therefore, only engage when you know that victory has been won.
Right. Yeah. This is like it reminds me of fighting games. Like you can pick fighters that are stronger against other fighters, and there are some people who just sit on one fighter the entire time, and that's not a horrible idea. But in some fighting games, it is. It's better just to do whenever they're weakest against.
Mm-hmm.
So like you choose the battle where you've already basically won, and then you fight that guy rather than trying to play your favorite character versus someone who's clearly like a range fighter who's going to kill you. He's going to just destroy you.
Yeah, and I like what he says. Like you put your first priority is put yourself beyond the possibility of defeat, and then you wait for the opportunity to present itself. So like you play a real defensive game, and then you wait for the enemy to make a mistake, and you capitalize on that.
Yeah, that reminds me of Mech and Terran and StarCraft.
Yeah, it made me think of StarCraft 2, where you just like bunker in and you just wait. Eventually, the Zerg is gonna like do some kind of attack that's gonna waste most of his forces, and you're like, okay, now the enemy has defeated himself. Now I go in.
Counterattack. Yep. You just
And that's that kind of Taoist, almost like kung fu notion I was talking about before, where it's less aggressive and more like all I can control is myself, and then my opponent will defeat himself attacking me.
Yeah. I took Wing Chun Kung Fu when I was younger, and it was a lot about that. Like monopolize on your enemy once they step into you. It was very defensive. Because they're gonna expose something as they throw out a limb. If you've got 4 limbs in defense and he's got 1 in offense and 3 maybe in defense, but he's clearly probably not thinking about that, he's gonna expose the target, and that's when you attack. So,
yeah. And I put this under like good advice and not obvious, because I think the impulse is more like I win by being good at attacking and I lose because I wasn't attacking enough.
Right.
And it seems trite, like the best defense is a good, or the best offense is a good defense, or the best defense is a good offense. Again, it could work either way, depending on what you want. But like, I just like the idea of like it's almost like in life, right? Like you can't really control other people, but you can make yourself awesome. You can put yourself beyond the possibility of defeat, and then you can exploit weaknesses in other people that aren't doing that.
Right. Yeah, and don't take fights that you can't take. Reminds me of real life when was that with you when we were out at the Steak and Shake?
Yeah, tell that story.
Oh my gosh, we were at the Steak and Shake like late at night, and this was in college. I don't remember what we were doing.
Just going out for shakes and burgers.
Okay, yeah.
One of the only places that's open late at night. It's like 2 in the morning or something.
Yeah, so we're out at this place, and we're eating, and then this obnoxious like douchebags, like frat boys, sit across from us, like this booth like right behind us or in front of you, depending on which side of the booth you're on, but it doesn't matter. They sit right next to us, and they're being obnoxious and yelling and stuff. And whatever. And we just continue just doing our own thing. And eventually one of them throws something on our table, and we're like, "What? What are you doing?" And then it happens again. And we were like, "Okay, that's not real funny, man. Can you guys not do that?" And they're like, "What? You guys want to fucking fight?" And I was like, "What? What about that makes you think we want to fight? Like, I don't. Listen, man, we're just eating our food here." And they were pretty big dudes. That's the thing. Like,
and they outnumbered us too. Like they had every reason to want to fight, right? Because they were going to win.
Yeah, there's 5 of them, so they filled up the booth, and I had a guy pulled up, to the edge of the table, and we had 3, and it was me, and I was still super scrawny, and this is military.
Yeah,
and,
we were super lanky, and Jimmy and me.
Yeah, and none of us, all of us were just gangly, D&D nerds.
Gangly youth.
Yeah. And Jimmy was and Jimmy had taken a little martial arts too, but his was Tai Chi.
Yeah, it was like that. What old people do for exercise in the park.
Some
people
just yeah, just calling it a martial art is actually under debate as well. So it's considered more like yoga,
Yeah, it's just flowing movements.
Yeah, super slow. But he's like, I know Tai Chi, and I was like, oh, Jimmy, I don't know, man. And back then he was more squirrely. He'd have these weird ideas, and he'd just go with them.
Yeah.
And so
he decides prefrontal cortex was still in development, as were all of ours.
Exactly. So he's like, let's do it, man. Would you guys? Yeah, we'll fucking fight. And I was like, whoa, Jimmy, overruled. Sidebar.
We were all I remember we were all in our pajamas almost. We were just wearing goofy pants, and I was in sandals, and we're basically barefoot. And
they have every advantage. There's 5 of them. There's 3 of us, and they are big frat guys. That were they had been working out, at least a couple of them. Because I remember thinking, I can't take any of these guys one-on-one. I don't think.
Yeah.
And especially, oh man, at the time I knew Kung Fu, which is a striking martial art, and that's just not good, especially for multiple people, because people get frustrated and they take you down to the ground and you just lose. So anyway, the point is that we would have lost ridiculously by any assessment of the situation. And then he's like, no man, let's go get him, because they're like, hey, fuck you guys, and really mess with high school level, and I was like,
yeah.
Guys, you're drunk, just go home. And they were like, oh no, oh yeah, okay, I'm so fucking drunk, then I guess you want to fight, and they're really just pushing this fight thing. And I was like, no, I can tell you guys are really angry and you guys want to get in a fight, but we're not the ones who are going to be fighting you. And Jimmy's like, I'll fight you. And I was like, no, dude, no. Stop. We're like, we can't win this fight. The victory is assured for them. So eventually, they leave and they say they're waiting in the parking lot. So they walk outside and they're just standing by their cars, because Steak and Shake has a bunch of windows. And we were like, he's like, let's go. You guys ready? Let's go. Let's get our checks. And I was like, no, dude. If you walk out there, we're gonna get owned. And he's like, oh, whatever, you might, but I'll beat mine up real quick and I'll come help you guys. And I was like, oh, Jimmy, you've never been in a real fight. I forgot. I've been in a lot of real fights. I got picked on a lot, and they are not fun, and they are not clean. There's nothing clean about them.
Not fun to be punched in the face. If you've ever had that happen to you, don't want it to happen again.
Yeah, it hurts real good. If you get hit right in the nose, your eyes water. Oh, it hurts. Anyway, so I was like, nah, I don't know, Jimmy, man. I don't think that's a good idea. So anyway, the point is Jimmy's pushing this fight thing too, and we were trying to pull it back.
He was starting to be like, oh man, I feel like a coward. I hate this. We're like, yeah, we all feel bad. None of us want to be doing this right now.
That's why bullying is effective. But the only thing we can do is attend to our responses. And I know one response that's guaranteed to lose is to go fight, because then we feel stupid and we get beat the shit out of. We feel stupid and then you move on. This is not something we can fight for. We can't win. This isn't for honor. This is for nothing. There's no point in this. Just a bunch of drunk guys. Let them go. But anyway, so we chose that battle as the point. We looked at it, we assessed the situation, they said there was no chance of victory here. And it just goes to show that some people don't always make the decisions like that. But, it's more like an honor thing. But, I don't know. Or maybe he thought we really could win.
Yeah, I don't know I don't know if he really thought we could win or if he just hated feeling like a coward, because no one likes to feel like a coward. But
yeah, then what do you do with that? He has that anxiety right now because this sucks and we're in public and we're getting picked on, and that's fucking lame, especially in college. Why is that happening? But what do you do with it? I mean, I can go try to fight and get my butt kicked and then feel really stupid, or I could just sit here and just go on with their day and then laugh at them. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever. The point is yeah. So you pick your battles is the point. And another one was this goes right along with this that I found useful was know your enemy as you know yourself. It's kind of that principle in general. Yeah. So he says things like avoid prolonged warfare. Make sure you do take your enemy's resources into account. And then use the big part of it is once you know your enemy, you use their strength to augment your own. So really what he was saying was know your enemy very well, and then work towards your strengths and against his weaknesses, and then also turn his strengths somehow to help you.
Right. That's like remember Admiral Thrawn in the EU Star Wars books, like the Thrawn novels.
Yeah.
That was his big thing, right? Like he would study each planet before he attacked and be like, oh, these aliens, they tend to think in very ordered, precise, like mathematical patterns. Like they're very precise and ordered. So he would order his ships to do like random chaotic flight patterns and really throw them into disarray.
Right. Yeah. So he's augmenting his own strength. Exactly. And I think this is also like one of those no duh moments. But I see a lot of people who don't do this. Like, you know, if I'm playing, it's kind of the idea of Yomi that we were talking about on the Sterling idea. If you're playing someone and you know that someone, then use that to your advantage. Like I know that Tim will be, because he takes a long time on campaigns. He's very careful. He's going to be defensive. I know that. So I need to do something that helps me have a strategy where that's actually a weakness for him.
Right.
So like do a lot of furious attacks, maybe if it's like a fighter game, or if it's like a StarCraft game, I would monopolize. I would go straight for the late game. I know he's not going to attack, so I go straight for the late game. And like take huge risks in the early game because I know he's not going to move out. Just things like that.
Right.
Knowing your enemy, I feel like is a big deal, and that's the most part. That's the most fun part of game. I think of all aspects of gaming. I think reading your opponent and then reading them correctly is like the most fun. I love it.
Although, again, that's something you were doing before you read this book in college.
Yeah, that's true, yeah, of course.
I like this part. He says, do not swallow bait offered by the enemy. Well, that part's obvious. Like, if it's bait, you don't want to swallow it. But then he says, do not interfere with an army that is returning home. And I was like, wait, why? Oh, because they're going to fight harder if they think they're going home, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then he says, when you surround an army, leave an outlet free. Do not press a desperate foe too hard. So, like, that's not something that we would do. That's not one of those intuitive things, right? Like, you're like, oh, destroy them, surround them, make sure no one escapes. But that actually makes you lose a lot more men in the process because, a cornered rat's going to fight harder. Like, if they have a way out, they're going to try and make for that and flee. But if not, they're going to fight to the last man.
Right. Yeah, many war movies have shown the efficacy of this. At least
it's also good in like a debate or like an argument, like with a spouse or a girlfriend or something. Like,
yes,
you have to leave them a way out, or they're gonna like stop seeing any kind of reason, just like dig in twice as hard.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Ask yourself at a lot of times throughout the argument whether this is something that's actually going to help you in any way. Like, not on principle, quote unquote. If you use that, I instantly stop people and I go, nope, try again without saying that. Because principle doesn't mean anything. I want to know, how is this going to help you? And if they're like, oh, well, it'll prove a point. I go, what does that mean? Well, she'll know the truth. So what? So what? I didn't ask knowing. I said, how is she going to behave differently? She'll be less likely to do in the future. That's not true, actually. Empirically, that's not true. To change someone's mind or change their behavior, I can show you how to do it, and it is not by arguing. So, or not by pressing a point to the point of like ad nauseum. You introduced it, and then as they feel dejected to it, and they go, ugh, they put up their, just physiologically, we can't be as rational whenever we feel offended about something that's just been brought up. So you let it go, and you go, okay, that's just a thought I had. And then later, start, keep prodding, give a little more evidence, and then as soon as they hit that point, you de-escalate or you leave the situation. You say, all right.
Yeah, it says surround the army, then leave an outlet free. Do not press the desperate foe too hard. So to me, it makes me think of like, let's say you're winning the argument, like all the points are in your favor, your logic's sound, everything is good, but then you have to leave an outlet free, like be like, well, what about this? Don't you think this could be a good way? And like kind of give them a way to like still be kind of right and still get a way out with their honor intact and be like, okay, yeah, I can do that. And you're like, give them ways they could change, Instead of just be like, you're the worst because you do this and this and this. It's like, I really don't like it when you do this, but I do like it when you do that. What if we focused on that more? And like, to me, that's what leaving an outlet free is, right? Like, it's giving them something they can change so they don't feel helpless.
Right.
Because when you feel helpless, you're just going to dig in and like be angry.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good application talking about in arguments because I do that same thing where it's if you're not going to win, I mean, if you can, winning and being effective are two different things. Winning an argument. Like, I see this happen all the time with people, or winning a war or a fight. Maybe not in a video game, because if you have the win condition in your hand, then you win, and then whatever. But in a long-term game, let's say I'm like training up, let's say that Tim wanted to play StarCraft or something, and I'm training him up. Well, then I would take a couple of losses. I do this with, Elijah, where I'll let him win a couple times so he can taste the sweetness of victory, And that way, you let them kind of give them a win condition, is how I put it in the therapy room. Is what's their win condition? How do they walk away from this feeling good? And if they say, oh, I don't know, then I say, then you're not being the correct. You're not doing it correctly.
Right.
Like a spouse, if it's a marital or like friendship, I'm saying you're being a bad friend. Or like in this, like in a war situation. The point is you're taking heavy losses for that quote-unquote win, and that just doesn't make any sense. So.
Right. And then the last thing that I found for good advice, I think this is really good advice because I've seen people ignore this to their detriment a lot in games. So he says, and we've kind of touched on this, but he says, move not unless you see an advantage. Use not your troops unless there is something to be gained. Fight not unless the position is critical. No ruler should put troops into the field merely to gratify his own spleen, meaning like his anger. No general should fight a battle simply out of pique. If it is to your advantage, make a forward move. If not, stay where you are. Do you remember when you used to play Hearthstone and you lost every single game?
Yeah.
Now, do you remember what I kept asking you before you'd make a move?
Yeah, well, there's a couple things. One, you said, what are you going to do 2 things down the road? Or then why are you playing that card?
Yeah, like what question 1, what do you gain from this? And question, if you didn't have a satisfying answer, like then why are you playing that right now? And that's kind of what I got out of that. Like, don't move unless you see something to be gained. Use not your troops unless there's something to be gained. Fight not unless the position's critical. Move not unless you see an advantage. Like, I see, not just in Hearthstone, but I see like StarCraft, every kind of game, you'll see a lot of people doing these engagements or doing just because they're bored, I guess. Like, they just want something to happen, so they're making things happen, but without knowing why.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought that was really good advice.
Yeah, just in general, like that's something I'll push on this podcast a lot. I push a lot in therapy. I push a lot in real life. Is the idea of functional analysis, which just means why are you doing that? Like honestly, and you have to be objective about it. You can't, give me some trite stuff based on principle, like say something like, well, at the 6-minute point, you always attack, and I say, and that's not what I asked. I said, why are you doing that right now in this context, in this instant? What does this gain you right now? And then they're like, well, advantage. I'm like, what does that mean? And they're like, moral advantage. I'm like, what does that mean? Or psychological advantage. What does that mean? Well, they're scared. Okay, so for being scared, you just threw away 5 units. Is that a good idea? Like, oh no, scared doesn't mean anything to me either. What is behaviorally? What does that mean? Oh, well, they're less likely to move out. Okay, let's see if that's true. Nope, he's moving out. It's that constant tangible. What's the tangible benefit you're getting from this? That functional analysis in any game. Like, yeah, Hearthstone too. Like, why did you play that card? Like, what does that gain you? Well, it's good to play 4 mana. Why in this situation is that a good idea?
Why did you play this card? Well, it dealt 3 damage to him. Okay, now he's at 27 instead of 30. What did that do for you?
Yeah. Get him closer to death. Okay, then what does that mean? Well, that means that I'm more likely to win. All right, let's test that. And then, nope, you lost. So, no. So, yeah, because if you break it down to, the actual behavioral target is what we call it, the actual thing you think that it's getting you, it's probably not if it was a dumb move. Because, well, obviously, it's necessarily not if it was a
right. And once you started thinking that way, you started winning a lot of Hearthstone, and I feel like I feel like a lot of us get stuck in these traps where we start playing these games and we're just doing the action because we want to do an action, and we're not actually accomplishing anything. We're just kind of spending our force with nothing to show for it, and that goes back to that Taoism thing of use force precisely and in small measure.
Well, and I think it just shows a mastery of the system once you can do it based on functional analysis. Because when you first start playing StarCraft, for example, or Hearthstone, you're going on general principles. Like they say things like it's good to play it's good to spend all your mana, right? In general, and then you say, all right, so then you try to do that, and then over time it's like, but when do you not want to do it? And then that's like, oh, and then again, this is the part where it shows a limited knowledge of something or limited intelligence even if people are making overall general statements and not qualifying them as overall general, and they're just saying this is what you do, or the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not murder.
Yeah.
Dude, I've murdered people in my life and I've got a medal for it, so pretty sure that's not right because we're a Christian nation. So maybe thou shalt not murder in the context of an innocent. Maybe if you just said murder an innocent, maybe that would have been good. Literally some sort of contingency basically.
And it gets even more complicated with more complicated games, right? Hearthstone, take it one step up to Magic the Gathering. It's spend all your mana, but in Magic the Gathering, there's a thing called interrupts where you can play spells on another person's turn, kind of like traps in Hearthstone, except you have to actually cast them.
Oh, okay.
And sometimes you don't want to play all your mana because you might have an interrupt, or maybe you don't have an interrupt, but you want him to think you do, so you're going to leave a couple mana open just so he doesn't play anything crazy because he's afraid you're going to counterspell it.
Right.
So it's you get these basic fundamental rules, but you also have to ask yourself, does this apply in every situation? It's like Descartes, right? Where he took everything he believed in and then unpacked it and then re-put it together. Is this still true? Okay, is this still true? You have to re-examine everything and not just rely on heuristics.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. A careful analysis and objectivity. That was I think you asked me a couple of podcasts ago, what would be the one thing you'd ask of the entire world if you could change anything? And I said something like intellectual honesty or objectivity,
Hmm.
like just being objective. So many people say crap, and I'm like, "Ugh," and this is such a headache for me in the therapy room where I'm like, okay, really? Do you really think that? Yeah, man, I really think that, like, I'm gonna die if I walk outside. You really think that? Well, I guess not. Then why do you keep saying that? Because when you say that, that reinforces the idea, and then you act on that idea. Things like that.
Right.
Be objective. Say exactly when you think you'll die, which is a panic attack or whatever. So, like, in the situation that you feel trapped, then you will feel that you're dying, but you're actually not going to die. Things like that. Like, that's kind of the emphasis of this. Is like these are general principles that just generally aren't good. And if they are, then there are situations in which they're good.
Right.
But the funny thing is, like, this seemed to me to, let's say things were just traditional back then. This is the only thing that makes sense to me. I don't know about the historical nature of, like, or context in which this was released, but I'm imagining everyone was like super, sort of like when in the American Revolution where we started using guerrilla tactics. Like we changed the game. I wonder if this book wasn't kind of a game changer. Do you know anything about that? Like, were they just doing, like, I don't know, war poorly back then, or less effectively and more based on principle and honor and stuff?
Yeah, I don't know. That's the only context I could see this book being important, is if it was like teaching people like to think in a new way. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, this. In fact, I probably suspect that's the case. Like, why it gained so much traction.
Yeah.
But again, I think that has a place in the history of warfare, but not in a like modern, like, this is how we should do it context.
Right, like step one. That's funny because, okay, so that seems to suggest to me that this began, or at least this was instrumental in the kind of slow decline, not slow decline, that is judgmental, the movement towards guerrilla tactics, which we is basically all we use now. We rarely, I mean, we make bases and things, but we operate on, like, pure effectiveness. I say pure. Okay, so, but it's true that I can see the good part of that, because that's going to save your friendly forces' lives, and it's going to maximize the efficiency of how well you kill the enemy, right? But where do we draw the line there? Because if you completely believe in this, and I assume most people don't, then Vlad the Impaler was the best general ever. Because he used fear by, like, putting up bodies, impaling them, having them slowly die so they're screaming. Nobody would F with that guy, right? So seems to me that if we really believe in this principle, we would be really concentrating on what's effective, what's pragmatic, what works, versus, like, any sort of agreement or rules, like, Geneva Convention. Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's more quote-unquote humane, but it's not as practical. Terrorism is more practical as far as, like, lives versus other lives.
Yeah, like, and again, it's depends on context, right? It depends on your lens that you're seeing it through, because you could argue that the American revolutionaries were terrorists because they were doing things that were, like, unconventional, like dishonorable, and ambushing people at dinner and stuff, and
yeah.
So
that's what I mean. Like, I'm kind of calling this into question. Is, like, we have this idea that, like, we are there now. This guerrilla tactics. We're like, oh yeah, we're pragmatic now. We do things because they're more effective. But I don't know, it made me think that, like, yeah, but do we? I mean, because really, like the IRA, for example, they blew up a lot of stuff, but there's a cool thing where they try to never take an Irish citizen's life, I mean. And so, like, this was one of the things I had to study in counter-terror school, and we did, like, one of my friends was doing the IRA, and I was doing these French people from Corsica. It's called the FNLA or something. Anyway, they're trying to liberate Corsica, and they're quote-unquote terrorists. But they were also gentlemen terrorists, where I say gentlemen terrorists, like, laughingly, but what I mean is they would call in, like, if they were going to bomb a postal building, they would call in and say, you have 1 minute to leave the building, it will be bombed. And they would put the phone down. And that way, if people died, it was like, that was part of the system. Those people didn't warn their people, or something happened, or they were calling a bluff or something. But they did reasonably as well as they could to make sure that no one died. And I think that would, be one step, but it's still less effective, because then maybe there's a bomb squad there, Like, I don't know. If you're just looking for pure pragmatism, I think the natural end of the road is, like, just like torture, Vlad the Impaler type stuff.
Drone strikes.
Yeah. So I just wanted to put that in context and kind of think, like, at least for myself, I was thinking, well, I don't know, we're still not there, and I'm kind of glad we aren't, but I think everyone was glad at the time that they weren't one step further. Like, the British, looked down on us.
Yeah, I think there's like something innately distasteful about becoming more efficient at murdering large numbers of enemies.
Yeah.
I'm a more efficient murderer. Great.
Yeah, that's true. Although I don't feel bad at all whenever I take cover. If I start taking fire, I take cover so that I can more efficiently murder them and not die myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Or like when we armored up, we get inside of our ASVs or something, and I had a Mark 19, which is an automatic grenade launcher, just that fast, and those are grenades or they're grenade rounds, and you could clear an entire highway in like a couple seconds. It was insane and super efficient. But I'd still take that option every time if I could. If they're like, "Hey, you want to go on the ASV or on foot?" I'd be like, "ASV, thank you."
Yeah.
I'll be in the turret. But I don't know. I don't know. Like that was just something I was thinking at the end of everything. It's like I feel like we've moved way past this Art of War stuff, but we're still kind of we can't entirely look down on it and say that they just were one step closer to this ultimate where we are now.
Yeah, this is kind of looking back on it. There's a lot of obviously wrong. There's a lot of just obvious stuff, but there's some gems in there that I don't think we've still taken to heart yet.
Right.
Just from seeing how people play video games.
Yeah, that's for sure. And like the most important thing to me, maybe it's because I was in psychology, but is the functional analysis of the whole thing. It seems like kind of permeate the entire book. Is like, dude, why? Like this is more effective. Do this,
Yeah, it's that Taoist framework that's just very much about like redirecting and analyzing what you're doing instead of just like hit it with a hammer because it's a nail.
Right, exactly. Cool. I hope that didn't get too like trite, I guess, or too slow, because there's a lot of things that's like, yeah, this isn't really useful, but hopefully we were able to say like, yeah, here's some things that are useful. Overall, I think that at least for me, the takeaway message was that Art of War, get over it. It's not a big deal. Just be pragmatic, and you'll be way better. Just think about what is this buying me right now in this context. In every decision you make, while you're training, and you'll become a better gamer.
I was looking for the text to this when we started doing this episode, looking for like the online text, and first image that came up was Paris Hilton reading The Art of War. It was the silliest thing I've ever seen.
Well, and that's the thing. Like you mentioned the same thing. Is I pulled this off my shelf and I started reading it, and I literally fell asleep. And I think you said the same thing. Like you fell asleep or you were bored or something too. It's just so. I already read it once, but it'd been like 10 years, so I figured, this will be fine. And it's just so obvious and there's a couple gems, like that's what it says, but they all fall in line with an overarching theory of pragmatism. Like do this and know why you do it.
Right. A little side note: did you know that China has a Sun Tzu kind of theme park coming up?
No.
Yeah, it's like at Sun Tzu Culture Park. It's like a big roller coaster ride area. I don't know how they're gonna make that Sun Tzu themed, but I just thought he's like a national hero to China. Like it's like saying George Washington's really overrated as a president. Like saying Sun Tzu is an overrated tactician is like that probably would make, if we had any Chinese listeners, make him pretty upset. But he's getting his own theme park.
Oh well, good for him. It's important to have national heroes, I guess.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of it is too. It's just we tend to mythologize our national heroes, right? Like George Washington, he never had a cherry tree moment with his father, but we tell that story in school because it keeps the mythos alive. That he was like super honest.
Yeah. Yeah. And we gloss over all the other founding fathers, like their shortcomings.
Right.
Kind of like, oh yeah, and also
Thomas Jefferson had some slaves and he slept with them. Anyway, he was really good.
And Benjamin Franklin was a huge prostituter.
But he had so much syphilis.
Yeah. But we don't talk about that. We talk about the key and the lightning.
Right.
That he signed it.
Really he discovered electricity, man. People didn't know that electricity was a thing.
Yeah.
No, what is he? He invented electricity. That's what I love. He invented electricity. Before that, there were no electrons that would get agitated.
Yeah. Weird dude. But, yeah, smart guy, though.
Yeah.
Anyway. So, I guess that wraps up the in-depth analysis portion. Do you think it's time to move on to the feedback section? Sure. All right, let's move on. All right, feedback. That's where we talk about the interactions we had with the community. So first, iTunes reviews. Did we get any of those?
We did. We got one from MTG Rogue, so a Magic the Gathering fan. And he says, it's a 5-star review. He says, the Game Theory podcast is the best podcast available or maybe even possible relating to games.
Whoa.
We get that superlatives coming in strong right from the beginning.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Oh, good. I'm glad that we are even theoretically the best. The primary focus of the show is on video games, and the hosts are incredibly suited to discussing this topic. Because video games are usually a medium for telling a story, David's expertise in literature, storytelling tropes, character analysis, and literary comparisons are invaluable. Jeremiah tackles the topics from a completely different angle. People have played games since before recorded history, and today they are still growing in popularity. Haven't you wondered why? As a clinical psychologist, Jeremiah explains exactly why we enjoy games, how they affect us.
Not a clinical psychologist, just putting that in there. For any listeners, I'm not a clinical psychologist. I'm getting my degree right now, and I will be here in a couple years. But
okay, as a future clinical psychologist, Jeremiah explains exactly why we enjoy games, how they affect us, and why we react the way we do to games. Together, David and Jeremiah cover everything that's important about gaming, the story of the game, and the impact that story has on the audience. The only criticism I can think of is that I'd like to hear a bit more from David. Jeremiah is fascinating, and I love the psychology discussed, but sometimes it does seem like the in-depth analysis portion of the show is all Jeremiah, and I miss my buddy David. Thanks, guys. Keep them coming.
Aw, sorry.
Well, thanks for the feedback. We are trying to strike more of a balance. The thing is, usually there's, like, just the nature of psychology. It's going to always relate to anything you're talking about.
Yeah, it's super broad. I remember my advisor when I came into to graduate school, he said the same thing. He just said, there's nothing you can't do where you're not the expert. At least an expert in some regard. You know, to like politics, well, that involves humans and social groups. You know, or even like the independent decision making. Then it's like, well, what about marketing? Well, definitely. What about business? Well, definitely. You're managing a whole group of people. Okay. Well, what about military? Definitely, absolutely. That's pushing your troops to be more effective, and also like what kind of psychological effects you can have on the enemy. Like, you can't name a subject where you're not going to be an expert of some kind, right? So yeah, it's just the general nature of psychology. I'll probably have more to say, and I'll just tone down. I always feel like I don't know how much to say, so that's useful feedback to me, is that, you know, calm down a little bit.
Settle down. Yeah, we've actually been trying to find a way to keep it balanced, so it's not just the psychology podcast.
Yeah.
Some topics like vampires are going to really play into my expertise on French literature, and some topics like
immersion.
Yeah. That's good storytelling stuff too, but there's some that are like very much tilted towards psychology, so it might seem more Jeremiah heavy than it could have been.
True, and the specific application of psychology to video games is my expertise. So whereas David, you know, he learned everything about literature, and so he's applying it here. He has to do that just by thinking about it, you know, whereas like I'm kind of biased because that's my specialty. That's where I pour my academic thought into. So I might just have more immediately relevant. I don't know, but
right, like it's like my master's is in French literature, and that doesn't really have a lot of like overlap compared to your master's, which is like my thesis on Joan of Arc versus your thesis on video games and how they affect people.
Right.
You're definitely gonna have a lot of very informed opinions, because that's where you're researching.
Yeah, and I'll be able to cite like specific studies. It's just, yeah, that's just the nature of it. But yeah, but that's really useful feedback, though. I appreciate that. I'll try to be more careful about my parts, because I really just don't know how much to throw in most of the time. So I just kind of start throwing things in and then hope it sounds good.
Yeah, so thank you for that. So if you guys want to leave us any feedback, we love iTunes reviews because it helps us get more visibility on the iStore, which is still where most people get their podcasts.
Yes.
So you can go on iTunes, leave us a review. If you type it up, we will read it on the air, so you'll have your moment of either praising or chastising us made public.
Yes. We will read it on air no matter how scathing it is.
Yep. In fact, the scathing ones are kind of fun to read, too, because we make fun of them.
Yeah. Also, we've got a Twitter, which is twitter.com/GameTheoryPod. You know, I haven't been posting on that much this summer. I need to get better about that. I don't need to. I think it would be helpful for us to get more followers on there, and a lot of interesting things. But yeah, so hopefully I can do that as well. It's just it's difficult with a family, and then getting them with this. I've got like 1,000 jobs. They strap you down with like 1,000 jobs in clinical psych programs, and they also expect you to do your research, and also expect you to be like teaching and like just doing everything. So I haven't been real good about it. Sorry, but when I do post things, I think they're interesting. So follow us there at twitter.com/GameTheoryPod.
Right, and don't forget you can send your questions if you have any questions for us. Sometimes we get those, and you can send those to thegametheorypodcast@gmail.com.
Yes. Also, did we talk about the Facebook page yet? I forgot.
Not yet, not today.
Oh, facebook.com/groups, which is plural, groups/Game Theory Podcast. Yeah, check us out there. There's a lot of really cool information. It just feels like it's getting more and more bigger and bigger. Well, it is every day. We get usually a couple or one invite or so, here and there. But yeah, and just a lot of cool conversations. People talking about a lot of fun stuff. Like it's not always even perfectly video game related. Like one was about the new Venom movie coming out in 2017.
Yeah, somebody posted a study about video games are good for you in small doses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then there's conversation. It seems to be like a decent amount of conversation around Metal Gear. Happens a lot.
Well, yeah, someone asked actually about our last episode, the Darkness podcast, if we had started Metal Gear yet. And my excuse is I don't have a PlayStation, so I can play Metal Gear. I can play Solid Snake on Smash Brothers, but that's about the only exposure I get to it.
Oh yeah, and I meant to comment. Yes, I played 1, 2, and 3. I beat 1 and 2. 3 I didn't. I only played it for like a little bit, but I did something stupid with the first one because I was playing it at Tim's house, in JT's.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I only had limited time, and he's like, it's a really long game because he had a PlayStation, I didn't, and I would just hit start, I would skip all the cinema scenes, or I'd walk away and do something else. So I just didn't follow the first story at all, and so I got to the end, beat it. I beat it, and I was like, yeah, it was pretty good, but I didn't follow the story. And then the second one, it was like super story. Remember the first one, Solid Snake? I was like, yeah, and they were like, I was like, not really, and he's like, well, and then this twist. Big boss is this, and I won't get into it, but there was a lot of twists, and so I was like, well, god damn it. So I was I don't really understand what's going on in that world, but I like the games. They're fun, You run around, you get to fight huge mechs at the very end usually, and then...
Did you get the feeling that it kind of fit with our darkness, like nihilism kind of thing we were talking about last week?
At least the second one I feel like really did. The first one, I don't know, it does too. The overall theme is, pretty shitty. Because like the fact that like the shadow government stuff and like it's overall pretty depressing. But yeah, of what I followed. But we've got like some experts in our Facebook page. If you guys are interested in that, you guys can have some probably amazing discussions. Yeah, because that's not my forte there. But
Awesome.
Yeah, check it out. Just jump in and request to be a member, and then you'll be in on the fun. Yeah. So I guess that's probably all the feedback, maybe.
Yeah, so move on to next week.
Yeah, next week. Next week we should do, what did we talk about? We talked about doing, something more along these lines of like...
Yeah, so the big thing for Sun Tzu was know your enemy and know yourself. Mm-hmm. So next week will be our Know Thyself episode. Find out like what kind of gamer are you, what makes you tick, what will give you the most satisfaction out of a game. Like sometimes we don't think about these things, right? And then we're like, wait, why did I like that game? Or why don't I like this game and everyone else does? So we can actually go into the different, like I don't want to say personality types because I hate that, but the different just things that we value as gamers and how we can optimize our gaming time by sticking to the games that kind of play off of those things.
Yeah, and maybe we can get like the different types and then talk about why they're that way and stuff. Yeah.
So know thyself.
Cool. So next episode will be that, and we are looking forward to seeing you then. We still don't have a cool sign off, man. Amy commented on it. She said we should do like a new one every time, and just be awful at it.
Yeah, or just make it really awkward.
Yeah.
Stephen Carell style comedy where we feel uncomfortable and that's funny.
Yeah, exactly. That was on. That was one of the Tonight shows. I forgot which one it was. Oh, it was Craig Ferguson. Craig Ferguson. That's a researcher.
Chris Ferguson.
Is that it?
No, Craig Ferguson's right.
It is. Okay, so yeah, Chris Ferguson's a researcher. Sorry, Craig Ferguson is that Scottish guy. He goes at the end of his. He goes. This is just one of the clips I saw, and he goes. Hey, so I like to end everything. It was with Tina Fey. He goes. I like to end everything with an awkward silence. So say something thought provoking, and then I'll just be awkward. So. It was pretty funny. She said something like, "Did you know that babies are more likely to die if they have one left side eye is larger?" Some nonsense. And he goes, "Oh, that's huh." I was kind of looking around for a while, and then he just went to black.
Yeah, no, it's fun. The Order 66 podcast does the each other little sign off. Keep them dice rolling.
Yeah, right. So I don't know. We don't have anything clever, so. Bye.
All right, no. Give me a thing. Give me a call sign.
Oh, you mean mine?
Yeah, give me a sign off.
Oh. So, Maybe that gave you something to think about.
Nailed it.